A simple girl needed a fake husband to inherit her farm. The cowboy she hired was a secret millionaire. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Clara Clary Evans stood by the open stable door, letting the gentle breath of a bay mare warm her cold fingers. Dawn light spread across the Montana sky, revealing rolling fields and a distant line of rugged mountains. At 28, Clary had been tending these pastures most of her life. She carried herself with quiet confidence. Earthy brown hair usually pulled into a loose braid, hazel eyes sharpened by watchful focus, and an athletic build strengthened by years of ranch work. Though her posture was upright, her mind churned with a familiar worry she couldn't quite shake. "Morning, Miss Clary," came the gruff greeting of Jedediah "Jed" Stone, the ranch's longtime capataz. 65 years old and weathered like the fences he mended, he walked into the stable with slow but steady steps. His grey hair was trimmed short to keep out of his eyes during work, and he sported a wiry mustache that trembled whenever he offered his infrequent smiles. He had practically raised Clary after her parents moved east on urgent business matters years ago, leaving her to care for Willow Creek Ranch with only occasional help. She smiled lightly. "Morning, Jed. How's the herd?" Jed ran a hand over a horse's flank. "They're fine. Could use more feed soon if we get another cold snap, but we'll manage." His tone was calm, yet his gaze flicked toward Clary with concern. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" Clary shrugged, her shoulders stiff beneath her worn flannel jacket. "I was up late going over inventory. Winter's never easy." In truth, it wasn't just the ranch's finances that kept her awake. It was the memory of her grandfather's face, captured in a framed photograph on the mantel, reminding her that Willow Creek Ranch was now hers to protect. Protect from looming threats, both seen and unseen. She pushed aside the uneasy thought and moved down the row of stalls, checking each horse with methodical care. The smell of hay and leather usually brought her comfort, but that morning the air felt thick with tension. When she reached the last stall, she caught Jed's quiet voice from behind her. "Marcus Thorne has been in town," he said, removing his work gloves. "Stopped by the general store yesterday, talking about expansions and land sales." His expression darkened. "I don't trust the man any farther than I can throw him." Clary exhaled through her nose. "Marcus is all talk," she said, though her gut twisted. Marcus was her distant cousin, an investor from the city who only surfaced when Willow Creek might be in jeopardy. He circled the ranch like a vulture, waiting for the right moment to swoop in. "He's been trying to get his hands on this place for ages. There's no way I'm letting him anywhere near it." Jed watched her with a gaze that was both kind and protective. "Just keep an eye out, all right?" They left the stable together and strode toward the main house, a sprawling log home that stood against the backdrop of wide-open land. Weathered wooden steps led to a broad porch cluttered with boots and tools. Inside, the living room remained much as Clary's grandfather had left it. A large stone fireplace, well-worn couches, and walls adorned with framed photos of Willow Creek's past. One photo showed a younger Clary at around 15, standing proudly with her grandfather, both beaming after branding the first calf of the season. Another displayed her parents in front of the same fireplace, though they visited too rarely now. Clary paused before the fireplace, letting her gaze linger on her grandfather's portrait. He wore a broad cowboy hat and a grin that suggested he could outstubborn the wildest bronco. She whispered, "I'm doing my best," as though he might answer back. Instead, the silence settled, reminding her that the weight of the ranch was hers alone to carry. While Jed headed to the kitchen to brew coffee, Clary moved to a heavy wooden desk in the adjoining study. Stacks of paperwork were scattered across its surface, feed bills, ranch equipment receipts, and notes about potential improvements. She rifled through them, trying to find a sense of order or reassurance, but her concerns persisted. Rumors had reached her that Marcus was contacting lawyers. About what, she couldn't say, but the thought of him interfering again brought her right back to the uneasy nights from years past, when a crooked business partner once turned the family's finances upside down. Her father had trusted that partner with everything, only to realize too late the man's intentions were purely selfish. That betrayal nearly cost them Willow Creek. Even now, Clary could recall her mother's tear-streaked face as they scrambled to prevent a total financial meltdown. Eventually, her parents relocated to salvage what remained of their assets, leaving the ranch's day-to-day operations largely on Clary's shoulders. Now, as the rightful owner, she had vowed never to let another smooth-talking businessman walk away with her family's legacy. Yet an undercurrent of anxiety told her that storm clouds were gathering. She found Jed in the kitchen, setting out 2 mugs of steaming coffee. As she took hers, he fixed her with a probing look. "You should ride into town today," he suggested. "Pick up some supplies. Talk with Mrs. Gable at the store. She hears everything first. Any scuttlebutt about Marcus might slip through." Clary sipped her coffee. The strong, bitter taste grounded her. "I might," she said softly, "but let's not panic. This ranch has stood for generations. I'm not about to let anyone run roughshod over it." Jed nodded, yet the tension between them remained. Stepping onto the porch again, Clary surveyed the land. Miles of fencing, the scattered herd in the distance, and the vast sky overhead. This place was her life, her heritage. The thought of losing it twisted her stomach in knots. No matter what storms approached, she would find a way to keep Willow Creek Ranch alive. Squaring her shoulders, Clary took in a breath of crisp morning air. She could almost hear her grandfather's voice reminding her to stay strong, to stay rooted in the land she loved. Clary parked her old red pickup outside the modest law office on the main street of Hope Springs. Fresh dust streaked the vehicle's sides, evidence of the rocky path leading back to Willow Creek. She glared at the wooden sign reading Albright and Associates, steeling herself before stepping onto the sidewalk. A swirl of wind carried the smell of freshly brewed coffee from the cafe next door, but her nerves soured any temptation to grab a cup. Mr. Albright, a balding man in his mid-50s with neatly pressed slacks and a tidy tie, ushered her into his small office. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves cramped the space, and the single window offered a glimpse of the street, bustling with local ranchers and townsfolk. "I appreciate you coming in on short notice," he began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "There's a matter regarding your grandfather's testament that we need to discuss." Clary's pulse quickened. She sat on the worn leather chair opposite his desk, crossing her legs at the ankles. "I thought the estate was settled. He passed away 2 years ago. I've been living on and managing Willow Creek ever since." Mr. Albright cleared his throat. "Indeed, your grandfather left the ranch to you in essence, but there's a clause, an unusual one, that I only rediscovered upon reviewing the final documents. It states that you must be legally married by your 29th birthday to inherit Willow Creek Ranch in full." A stunned silence filled the room. Clary blinked, her hazel eyes narrowing in disbelief. "Married?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's absurd. Why would he do that?" The attorney lifted a file folder from a drawer. "He wrote it about 6 months before his passing, presumably concerned for your future. The language implies he wanted assurance that you'd have a stable partnership. If you aren't married by your 29th birthday..." He paused, glancing at the page. "The ranch is to be sold, and the proceeds split among a few relatives, including your cousin Marcus Thorne." Clary's heart thudded uncomfortably. "Marcus," she muttered. Memories of that predatory smirk and slick talk about maximizing the ranch's value rushed back. He's had his eye on Willow Creek for ages, but I turned 29 in just under 3 months. She pushed a strand of brown hair behind her ear. There's no way I can plan a wedding that fast. Nor do I want to. Mr. Albright's expression softened. I understand this is sudden, but your grandfather's instructions are clear. Either you comply, or the property reverts to the estate for sale. He slid a copy of the clause across the desk, as if the physical proof might quell any argument. I'm sorry, Miss Evans. I wish I had caught this sooner. Clary's lips pressed into a thin line. She could almost feel her world tilting. Marriage had never been on her radar, not after witnessing the betrayal her family endured years ago. She had locked her heart behind practical, no-nonsense walls, focusing solely on running the ranch. And now, with the stroke of a legal pen, everything was threatened. Is there any loophole? She demanded, scanning the page with trembling hands. Could it be contested? He shook his head. If you remain unmarried by that deadline, the court is bound to follow the will's directive. Marcus Thorne has already expressed readiness to buy the ranch at market price. He's well aware of the clause. Clary felt rage knotting her chest. It made twisted sense why Marcus had been lurking around more than usual, dropping hints in town. That snake, she hissed. Slamming the paper onto the desk, she rose abruptly, crossing to the window. Outside, a couple of teenage boys laughed as they carried groceries from the cafe. Life went on as usual, while her entire future threatened to collapse. Her reflection in the glass revealed the tightness in her jaw and the storm in her eyes. She turned back to Mr. Albright, trying to steady her voice. I guess I have no choice but to figure something out. I'm afraid not. I'd recommend speed. The legal procedure for marriage can be swift, but it must be genuine in the eyes of the law. Clary barked a humorless laugh. Genuine? I can't conjure a husband out of thin air, especially not someone I trust enough to tie myself to. My birthday's in 3 months, for God's sake. He closed the file, sadness evident in his gaze. I truly am sorry, Ms. Evans. If you need anything, I'm here. But time is short. Grinding her teeth, Clary yanked open the office door, stepping back onto the sidewalk. The midday sun reflected off dusty pickups and trucks loaded with hay. She envisioned Marcus smirking, eagerly awaiting her downfall, her fists clenched. Married, her grandfather, of all people, had set this trap. Did he really believe forcing her into wedlock would secure her happiness? Or had he worried she'd pour her life into the ranch without ever letting anyone else in? She couldn't fathom a neat solution, only a clock ticking louder with each passing moment. Though adrenaline pounded in her veins, she forced herself to breathe. She would not let Willow Creek slip away. If there was one thing Clary knew, it was how to fight for what mattered. She climbed into her pickup, slammed the door, and stared at the steering wheel. Tomorrow, she'd have to face Jed and break the news. She could already hear the shock in his voice. But she'd find a way. She had to. A forced marriage in 3 months. The thought was as foreign as selling the ranch. Yet one of those had to happen. And she refused to choose the latter. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon as Clary rode her buckskin mare across the open field, the sky above Montana hinting at imminent rain. The swirling wind tugged at her braided hair, sending a chill through her that matched the uneasy swirl in her stomach. She guided the mare back toward the barn, determined to clear her head with the last of the day's chores before confronting the reality of her grandfather's claws. Inside the barn, the dusty air settled around her in a suffocating hush. She slid off the saddle, her heart still pounding from the gallop. A fine layer of sweat gleamed on the mare's flanks. Clary stroked the horse's neck, while her mind replayed Mr. Albright's words, "You must be married by your 29th birthday." It sounded like a riddle from an old folk tale, except it was her life. Jed emerged from behind a stack of hay bales, his keen gaze noticing her tension. "You've been gone a while. Everything all right?" She avoided his eyes, busying herself with the bridle. "Went to see Mr. Albright," she said, voice clipped. "There's a complication in my grandfather's will." Concern etched itself into Jed's weathered features as he approached, arms folded over his broad chest. "You look fit to burst. Best you tell me now." Clary sucked in a breath, then spilled the story. She told him about the clause, about the looming deadline, and the threat of Marcus. With each word, her frustration flared, and by the time she finished, she was practically hurling the bridle onto a hook on the wall. Jed whistled low. "That's about the strangest inheritance stipulation I've heard, and you got 3 months. Less," she corrected grimly. "The end of August." They stood in heavy silence, the only sound the restless hooves of a horse in a nearby stall. Finally, Jed cleared his throat. "So you aim to get married, or you lose this place. This is your home, Clary. No question in my mind you'll do whatever it takes. But it's a damn unfair spot your granddad put you in." She brushed away a stubborn tear, threatening to fall. "I'm angry, Jed. Angry at him for not trusting me to handle my own life. Angry that Marcus gets to swoop in if I fail. And I hate the idea of wedding someone just to keep the ranch." Her voice cracked, revealing the heartbreak beneath her fierce exterior. Jed gently rested a calloused hand on her shoulder. "You got a right to be mad. But maybe he did it out of worry, not malice. You've run this ranch near flawlessly, but you barely trust anyone outside these fences. Maybe he hoped to see you build a life with somebody who cared about you as much as the ranch." Clary let out a bitter laugh, stepping away. "You know why I'm so guarded. My parents nearly lost everything thanks to a cheating business partner. My father was blindsided. I was just a teenager, but I remember the fear in my mother's eyes when we realized how close we were to bankruptcy. After that, I swore I'd never let anyone else meddle with Willow Creek." She swiped at the corner of her eye, feeling the old anger return. The sky rumbled outside, thunder rolling across the land. Jed sighed. "I don't blame you, but now you got a big choice to make. The clock's ticking." They both gazed out at the darkening horizon. Clary's heart felt as stormy as the skies. She wanted a solution that didn't involve tying herself to a stranger, but practical realities loomed. How else could she keep the ranch? After a moment, she forced herself to breathe. "I'll think of something," she managed, pressing a palm against the mare's neck, "even if it means that—" The word marriage remained caught in her throat, thick with distaste. She'd never wanted to rely on anyone, least of all a man whose intentions she couldn't read. Thunder cracked, and a burst of rain hammered the barn's tin roof. Jed wiped his brow, tossing a glance at Clary. "You could talk to old friends, see if someone would help you out." "I barely have friends," she snapped softly. "At least, not the kind who'd jump to marry me. That's a big ask." The wave of frustration rose again. "Damn it, I don't want to do this, Jed." "It feels wrong," he nodded. "I get it, but Willow Creek is your legacy. You can't let that slip away." Clary paced along the barn aisle, boots thudding on the dusty ground. The relentless pounding of rain outside matched the tempest in her chest. At last, she turned, resolved. "I'll exhaust every option, check for some loophole," she said, though part of her knew it was futile. Mr. Albright had been crystal clear. Jed approached, resting both hands gently on her arms. His voice was calm, fatherly. "You're not alone, Clary. Whatever you decide, I'll stand by you. Just promise not to bury yourself in pride so deep that you lose everything you've worked for." She nodded, tears stinging her eyes despite her efforts to hold them back. The thunder rumbled again, and with it, a resigned acceptance settled in her heart. She was cornered by fate and family, forced to consider the unthinkable. As the rain intensified, Clary realized the storm within her was far worse than the one beating on the barn roof. Somehow, she would have to brave it. The relentless buzz of her phone drew Clary from a fitful sleep. She squinted in the early morning light streaming through her bedroom curtains. Her heart lurched with dread when she read the caller ID. Albright and Associates. Groaning, she slid out of bed, stepping over a pair of worn jeans on the floor, and braced herself for bad news. "Morning, Ms. Evans," the lawyer's voice came through. "I'm calling to remind you of the timeline we discussed. We need to file the necessary paperwork before your birthday if you intend to meet your grandfather's stipulation." Clary gripped the phone, her gaze straying to the window overlooking the ranch yard. Horses grazed peacefully while her world felt anything but tranquil. "Understood," she replied tersely, her chest tight. "Is that all?" There was a pause. "Also, I received an inquiry from Mr. Thorne's counsel. He appears very motivated to move forward if you cannot fulfill the marriage requirement." She closed her eyes, every muscle tense. "Tell him not to get his hopes up." Her voice was ice, but her heart pounded in panic. She ended the call, feeling a fresh wave of pressure threatening to drown her. Downstairs, she found Jed sipping coffee at the kitchen table, a battered newspaper spread before him. "Bad news?" he asked without looking up. "Same old," she muttered, snagging a cup from the cupboard. "Marcus is breathing down our necks. Albright wants me to act fast, and I still have no solution." Jed lowered the newspaper. "I saw Marcus driving around town again last night. He's sniffing out your next move. You sure you don't want to talk to him?" Clary's jaw tightened. "Talk about what? He'd love for me to fail. That's all he's waiting for." She drank a swallow of coffee, wishing it would also scald away her worries. "I can't give him the satisfaction." Jed nodded slowly. "I heard a rumor from Mrs. Gable at the general store. She said Marcus has been bragging about an upcoming big purchase. Folks in town are starting to ask questions." She set the mug down with a hollow thud. The idea of losing the ranch to Marcus made her stomach roil. He was everything she despised, smooth-talking, profit-driven, and only interested in Willow Creek's potential resale value. She wanted to keep the ranch's soul intact, not see it turned into some commercial monstrosity. "Let him brag," she said, voice trembling with anger. "He won't get his hands on my land." But how? She had thought of old friends from high school. One was married, another lived in Florida, and the rest she'd lost contact with. She considered co-workers, but her only co-workers were the ranch hands, most already settled with families of their own. The humiliating notion of posting an online ad flickered in her mind, but she dismissed it with an incredulous shake of her head. The day wore on under a bright Montana sun that belied Clary's internal gloom. She attempted to focus on ranch tasks, overseeing a new shipment of feed, monitoring the health of the mares, and double-checking the fence lines. Each chore provided a short reprieve from the throbbing awareness that time was ticking. Late afternoon found her in the ranch office, her laptop open on a cluttered desk. A half-finished financial spreadsheet glowed on the screen, but her attention drifted to a blank browser tab. Out of sheer desperation, she typed "temporary marriage arrangement" and hit enter. A flurry of questionable websites and spammy ads filled her vision. She rubbed her temples in frustration. This was insane, yet the minutes on the clock refused to slow. A gentle knock on the door startled her. "Clary?" Jed's voice was soft. "You all right?" She shut the laptop. "Just exploring impossible options." He stepped in, looking concerned. "Look, I know it sounds foolish, but folks in big cities do all sorts of arrangements these days. You got your heart set against it, but we're in a corner." Clary stared at the closed laptop. "You think I should find a stranger online?" She felt ridiculous even saying it aloud. Jed offered a small shrug. Might not be the worst idea. If it's purely a business deal, no heartbreak involved, right? Her chest tightened at the word heartbreak. She had always avoided romantic entanglements. This step seemed like the ultimate betrayal of everything she believed in, marrying without love, purely to satisfy a piece of paper. But the alternative was unthinkable, losing her home. She turned back to the computer, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Could she truly do this? Could she trust a random applicant with her secret and her ranch? The memory of her father's betrayal loomed like a warning, yet Marcus's triumphant grin loomed larger. With a slow exhale, she began typing a draft. Seeking short-term partner with ranch skills, strictly business. Will discuss compensation. Her heart pounded at every keystroke. She read it over, hands trembling. It felt surreal, horrifying, and yet a tiny spark of hope flickered in the darkness. It would be a marriage of convenience, not love. No illusions, no heartbreak, just a cold transaction to save Willow Creek. She forced herself to hit and save, not yet daring to post it. Jed nodded in quiet support. Sometimes we do what we must, then we deal with the rest later. Clary swallowed hard, rising from the desk. I'll think it over tonight, she said, her voice distant. I can't believe it's come to this. As she left the office, the last rays of sunlight bathed the fields in gold. In a few weeks, she might have to walk this land with a stranger at her side, calling him husband. The notion made her stomach twist in knots, but if that was the cost of saving Willow Creek, she would pay it. She had no choice. 3 days later, Clary sat in her room, laptop perched on her knees, staring at the ad she had finally posted. The plain text read, "Seeking partner for short-term arrangement on a working ranch. Discretion required, compensation provided, contact via email." She felt a jolt of mortification each time she reread it. Even so, the responses trickling into her inbox revealed a bizarre world of prospective marriage-for-hire candidates, some obviously scammers, others downright concerning. She sighed and leaned back against the headboard, the late afternoon sun highlighting her fatigue in the small vanity mirror across the room. The only comfort was knowing nobody else in Hope Springs realized she'd gone to this extreme. Even Jed was somewhat in the dark about the final details. She swallowed her pride each time she opened a new email, scanning them for sincerity or any hint of real ranch experience. A quick knock rattled her bedroom door. "Clary!" Jed's muffled voice came through. "You decent?" "Yeah, come on in," she called. He stepped inside, resting one big hand on the doorframe. "Any luck?" Clary grimaced. "Mostly oddballs. A few from other countries wanting green cards. Some from big cities who clearly don't know a saddle from a seatbelt. It's disheartening. But I have to keep looking." Jed angled his head. "You sure about this, kid?" She set the laptop aside. "No, but I see no other way. I can't exactly waltz into the bar and propose to some local. Everybody in this county knows me, knows my business. If word got out, I'd be the laughingstock of Hope Springs." He nodded with a compassionate sigh. "Well, keep me posted. If I have to teach somebody how to bale hay or fix a fence, guess I'll do it." When he left, she returned to the screen. The next email subject line read, "Regarding your ranch position, E.W." She opened it with minimal expectations. "Hello, Ms. Evans. My name is Ethan Walker. I've spent the last few years working on horse ranches across different states. I'm currently looking for a place to settle, away from big city distractions. Your post caught my eye because it mentioned a short-term arrangement with possible compensation. I know my way around fencing, herding, and general ranch upkeep. If you'd like to talk more, I'm available any time. Ethan W." Clary reread the email twice. Unlike other replies, it was succinct and didn't ask for suspicious personal details. He claimed real ranch experience and seemed open to the nature of the arrangement, though she hadn't explicitly written marriage. A flicker of hope stirred within her. Could he be legitimate? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed a cautious response. "Hello, Ethan. Thank you for reaching out. I'm seeking someone comfortable with a rural life in Montana who isn't afraid of labor-intensive work. The arrangement is unusual, requires, among other things, a legal component. I can explain more if we meet in person. Are you nearby?" Clara Evans. Within an hour, she received a reply. He was in Bozeman, a couple of hours away, and would drive down to meet her at the Rusty Spur Diner if she wished. The speed and clarity of his replies stood out. Maybe this is the one, she thought with cautious optimism. She still felt uneasy about revealing the full truth, but time was slipping away fast. The next morning, Clary approached Jed in the stable. He looked up from grooming a Palomino stallion and raised an eyebrow. "You're heading to the Rusty Spur, that's in town." She avoided his questioning stare, adjusting the collar of her jacket. "Yeah, I have a meeting. With a potential a candidate." He let out a low whistle. "So soon? You sure he's not some swindler?" Clary shrugged, clinging to composure. "I don't know, but I have to find out. Wish me luck, Jed." A short while later, she parked outside the Rusty Spur Diner, an old establishment with a chipped neon sign. Despite being midweek, the parking lot had a fair number of pickups. Clary inhaled and stepped inside, scanning the booths for a man matching Ethan's description. She spotted him near the back, a tall figure in a plain denim shirt and worn boots, a cowboy hat resting on the bench beside him. As she approached, he stood politely, revealing tanned hands, a rugged jawline with a touch of stubble, and eyes the color of a clear blue sky. He offered a reserved smile. "Clara Evans?" he asked. "That's me. You must be Ethan Walker." They shook hands. His grip was firm but not overbearing, and he motioned for her to sit. An awkward pause followed, while the waitress poured them coffee. Clary noticed the faint calluses on his knuckles, suggesting real ranch work. She took a sip, then cleared her throat. "So, let's be straightforward. You said you're looking for a place away from big city life. Are you prepared for anything?" Ethan's gaze met hers calmly. "Yes, ma'am. I'm ready for a fresh start, whatever that entails." She offered a wry half-smile, her heart thumping. "Good," she said softly, "because if we do this, it won't be a typical job." He nodded, not breaking eye contact. "I understand." For the first time in weeks, Clary felt the smallest glimmer of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this arrangement could save Willow Creek and spare her from Marcus's looming threats. She set her mug down and gathered her courage to explain the next step, a short-term marriage of convenience. A desperate measure, no doubt, but one she prayed Ethan Walker might accept, for reasons she could only hope were genuine. Clary sat stiffly in the corner booth of the Rusty Spur Diner, her fingers interlaced around a mug of black coffee that had long gone lukewarm. The initial meeting with Ethan Walker had been straightforward enough. She explained her situation in guarded terms, and he, to her mild surprise, had not flinched. Yet now, an awkward tension lingered. They had agreed to meet again that afternoon to finalize arrangements, and Clary could not escape the feeling that her entire future hinged on the next few hours. A country tune played over the speakers, mixing with the hum of conversation from other patrons. The diner's white-tiled floor reflected a history of scuffed boots and spurred heels. Locals frequented the place for greasy burgers and no-nonsense coffee, so the arrival of Ethan, a near stranger, had already triggered some curious glances. At a corner table, Mrs. Gable, the owner of the local general store, was busily stirring her iced tea while eyeing Clary over the rim of her glass. When the door swung open, the little bell overhead chimed, and Ethan stepped inside. He was dressed similarly to their first meeting: worn jeans, a denim shirt rolled to the elbows, and a simple tan cowboy hat. Those same blue eyes found Clary instantly, and he offered a polite nod before crossing the diner with measured steps. "Hope I didn't keep you waiting," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. As he settled, the leather booth squeaked. He removed his hat and placed it gently on the table's edge. Clary forced a tight smile. "All good. I was just thinking over everything." She took a breath. "We need to make this look genuine, convincing enough for the entire town, plus the legal system. That means you'd move in at Willow Creek Ranch and, well, we'd be married. On paper." Ethan's gaze flickered with what she perceived as unease, but he nodded. "I understand. I'd like to hear more details about the timeline, your expectations, and compensation." His voice remained level, though Clary noted a hint of kindness beneath the practicality. It struck her that he was neither pushy nor overtly cautious. He seemed earnest, almost gentle in his approach. She explained in hushed tones that they had roughly 10 weeks until her birthday. The wedding license would have to be filed soon, so they'd likely arrange a small civil ceremony. She also emphasized how important it was to keep the ranch's daily operations intact. "You'll help with livestock, fences, general upkeep, anything a typical ranch hand would do. I can pay a fair wage on top of a bonus." She coughed delicately, feeling her cheeks warm. Leaning back, Ethan studied her. "I'm comfortable with that. I've done day work on ranches in Wyoming and Colorado. Hard labor's not an issue." Then he lifted his coffee cup, took a sip, and cleared his throat. "But I should mention I'm used to working with minimal fuss. If we do this, you can count on me to pull my weight." "Good," Clary replied. She tried to mask her relief at his calm acceptance. "We just need to be careful. People around Hope Springs know me well. If they sense something off, rumors will fly." She cast a glance toward Mrs. Gable's table, catching the older woman quickly looking away. Ethan followed her line of sight and offered a wry smile. "Small towns can be like that, but sometimes a little openness helps. If we act too secretive, folks might get more suspicious." He paused. "And about your cousin Marcus, should I be ready for him to cause trouble?" "Yes," she said flatly. "He'll likely sniff out any sign that our marriage is fake. If he succeeds, he'll challenge the will or claim fraud. So we need a backstory, at least something plausible." Ethan listened attentively as she began brainstorming. They'd say they met through a mutual acquaintance in Bozeman, discovered a shared love for ranching, and were struck by a whirlwind romance. It sounded cliché, but it might work well enough for a place like Hope Springs. The waitress came by, refilling their cups with fresh coffee. "Everything okay here, you two?" she asked, sporting a friendly grin. It was the same waitress, Lisa, who'd served them during their first meeting. Her eyebrows rose ever so slightly, as though sensing an undercurrent between Clary and Ethan. "Just fine," Clary said, offering the most genuine smile she could muster. Ethan thanked the waitress politely, then turned back to Clary. "I'll gather my things and move in tomorrow, if that's soon enough," he said. "That'll give me time to settle, and we can start convincing folks we're together." Clary nodded, her mind racing. "Yes, tomorrow works. I'll have a spare room set up." She paused, realizing that an actual married couple wouldn't keep 2 separate rooms, but quickly dismissed the concern. They'd need to manage that detail carefully, maybe claim they wanted privacy until after the official ceremony. Before parting ways, Ethan briefly reached across the table. His hand hovered near hers, as though testing whether she might accept some small gesture of reassurance. She didn't pull away, yet she couldn't quite bring herself to meet his gaze. A flood of conflicting emotions washed over her. Gratitude, wariness, and an odd flicker of anticipation. "Thank you for trusting me," he said quietly. "I know it's a strange deal." Clary cleared her throat. "We're just helping each other out." Her voice wavered. "Let's hope we can pull this off." They slipped out of the booth. Mrs. Gable openly stared as they headed for the door, and Clary felt the eyes of the diner tracking their every move. Outside, the afternoon sun felt unexpectedly warm against her cheeks. She watched Ethan walk to his truck, place the cowboy hat on his head, and give her a final nod. Tomorrow, he would move on to Willow Creek Ranch, and the charade would begin in earnest. For now, she could only pray this uneasy alliance would protect everything she held dear, and maybe, just maybe, not shatter what little remained of her guarded heart. Early the next morning, Clary stood on the ranch's wide front porch, arms crossed tight. As Ethan's old blue pickup rumbled onto the gravel drive, she tried to ignore the butterflies in her stomach. Never in her life had she expected a man she barely knew to drive up with the intent to become her husband, even if only on paper. Ethan hopped out, the engine still idling. A light breeze ruffled his brownish-blonde hair beneath a faded cap. Jed, standing off to the side, offered a curt nod. The tension was thick. Clary wondered if Ethan sensed how every ranch hand who happened to be nearby had paused work to stare. He walked up to the porch, tipping his cap politely. "Morning," he greeted. "Got a place I can unload?" Clary forced a steady breath. "Morning. We cleared out the spare bedroom in the main house. You can put your stuff there first. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Ethan's eyes flickered across the ranch yard, over the sturdy barn, the adjacent corrals, and the fields stretching toward the horizon. "Even bigger than I remembered," he said under his breath, as if impressed by Willow Creek's expanse. Jed stepped forward. "Name's Jed Stone. I've been here decades. You treat this place right, I'll do the same with you." Ethan extended a hand, and they shook with firm grips. "Understood, sir." "Don't call me sir," Jed grumbled, but there was a faint smile under his mustache. "Show me your truck, and I'll help carry your things." Clary trailed them back to the pickup, feeling oddly self-conscious about rummaging through a newcomer's belongings. She spotted a few cardboard boxes labeled with black marker, plus a worn duffel bag. No fancy luggage or evidence of a high-rolling lifestyle, just well-used gear. For a fleeting moment, she felt relief that he looked the part of a genuine rancher. The fewer questions raised, the better. Once they lugged everything inside, Ethan followed Clary down the hallway. She led him to a modest guest room with a single bed, a wooden dresser, and a small window offering a view of the corrals. "It's not much, but it's yours for now," she said, shifting on her feet. "If anybody asks, we'll say we prefer separate rooms until the ceremony. Folks around here might raise eyebrows, but it's simpler than pretending otherwise." He nodded. "I understand. Thank you." An awkward silence spread between them. Clary noticed that up close, Ethan's eyes held flecks of grey, and there was a tiny scar near his left temple. She had a sudden urge to ask how he got it, but swallowed the thought. Their relationship was supposed to be a business deal, not an open invitation for personal confessions. Jed's voice cut through the hush, calling from outside the door. "Clary, phone call for you. Something about a feed order." She excused herself quickly, grateful for the interruption. Hurrying to the kitchen phone, she handled the call in a brisk manner, but her mind drifted back to Ethan. This was the first step in pulling off their deception. Could they truly fool a watchful town? Not long after, she emerged onto the ranch yard to find Ethan already chatting with one of the ranch hands about repairing fence lines on the south side. The man seemed to respect Ethan's direct manner, and soon the two headed off to assess the needed tools. Clary stayed back, Observing, a soft flutter of cautious hope rose in her chest. If Ethan was skilled, or at least a fast learner, that would buy them credibility. As the day wore on, Ethan surprised her by lending a hand with routine chores, checking water troughs, hauling hay bales from storage, even assisting in grooming a couple of skittish horses. Clary tried to remain aloof, reminding herself that this was a transaction. Still, she caught herself stealing glances at him, curious about how deftly he handled each task. Around lunchtime, she found him near the barn, rolling up a length of weathered wire. His shirt was dusty, sweat darkening the fabric at the collar, and he looked genuinely in his element. When she approached, he paused and wiped his brow. "Hungry?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Starving," he admitted, a faint grin lighting his face. "Didn't realize I'd be working a full shift right away, but I'm not complaining." "Let's go inside," Clary said. "I'll fix us something." She hesitated. "Probably just sandwiches. Hope that's okay." They walked together, the prairie wind at their backs. Halfway there, Mrs. Gable's pickup pulled into the driveway, dust swirling behind it. Clary's stomach clenched. Of course, the biggest gossip in Hope Springs would appear the moment Ethan moved in. Waving politely, Clary forced a smile while Mrs. Gable hopped out, squinting at Ethan. "Hello there," the older woman said with bright curiosity. "I hear we've got a new helping hand. Are you one of Clary's friends?" Ethan shot Clary a glance that plainly asked, "Should we come clean or stay vague?" Clary cleared her throat. "Yes, he's helping run the place," she said, carefully omitting mention of anything else. She plastered on her best polite grin. "Mrs. Gable, this is Ethan Walker." Mrs. Gable's gaze flicked between them. "I see. Pleasure to meet you, Mr. Walker." Then her eyes narrowed with an almost playful glint. "Hope Springs sure loves new faces." Before Ethan could respond, Clary intervened, offering a quick reason to step inside and check on lunch. She guided Ethan away, leaving Mrs. Gable smiling knowingly behind them. Once inside, Clary let out a breath. Their arrangement was barely hours old, and already they had a visitor sniffing around. Maintaining the ruse would be harder than she'd hoped. Even so, she felt a tiny spark of relief. Ethan had arrived, and for better or worse, she was no longer fighting alone. By the end of Ethan's second day at Willow Creek, word had spread through Hope Springs that Clara Evans had a new man on the ranch. Whispers and speculation buzzed around the small community like honeybees in spring. It seemed everyone had an opinion. Some believed it was a whirlwind romance. Others suspected a ploy to strengthen the ranch's workforce. And Marcus Thorne, ever the prowling hawk, watched for any sign that might confirm his suspicions of fraud. Clary tried to ignore the gossip, focusing on ranch work alongside Ethan. They had a carefully rehearsed story about meeting through mutual acquaintances, sharing an instant connection, and deciding to settle at Willow Creek so they could build a future together. She cringed inwardly each time she recited the lines, but Ethan handled it with an unruffled calm that impressed her. One afternoon, as they prepared to head into town for the weekly farmers' market, Ethan caught her in the mudroom, lacing up her boots. "You sure you're ready for all the questions?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. She straightened, meeting his gaze. "No, but it's part of the deal." She smoothed her plaid shirt, mentally rehearsing her lines like an actor about to step onto a stage. "We need to look comfortable with each other. Otherwise, everyone will wonder why we're so stiff." A faint hint of a smile twitched at Ethan's lips. "Understood. Let's do our best." They drove Clary's pickup down the winding road into Hope Springs, passing weathered barns and wide-open fields along the way. At the farmers' market, a gathering of local ranchers and artisans selling produce, homemade pies, and handmade crafts, Clary felt the weight of countless stares. She gripped Ethan's hand in a show of affection she didn't fully feel, trying not to tense at the warmth of his palm against hers. They stopped at a stand offering fresh tomatoes. The vendor, a jovial older man named Carl, grinned broadly. "Clary, been a while since you brought a fella around here, and you must be Ethan. Heard about you from Mrs. Gable." Ethan managed a polite laugh, nodding. "Pleasure to meet you, Carl." Clary forced a casual smile, picking up a ripe tomato. "We're planning on making a big stew tonight," she said, handing over some cash. Small talk felt forced, yet essential for their cover. Carl made a point of winking at them as he counted out change. They ambled from stall to stall, collecting vegetables and enduring repeated versions of the same conversation. Some folks offered well wishes, others sly commentary about how fast things had happened. Clary found it exhausting. She had always guarded her personal life, and now, ironically, she had to flaunt a relationship that wasn't even real. Partway through their shopping, the crowd parted, revealing Marcus Thorne in his tailored jacket and pristine boots. Clary stiffened, an icy prickle at the back of her neck. Ethan's hand gave hers a reassuring squeeze, so subtle that she almost missed it. "Clary," Marcus said, inclining his head in a mock gentlemanly greeting. His gaze then flicked to Ethan. "I see you've brought along your new partner." "Ethan, was it?" "Yes, sir," Ethan replied evenly, returning the stare without blinking. His posture held steady confidence. Marcus's lips curved in a predatory smile. "Well, I do hope you're enjoying your time at Willow Creek." He turned a pointed look at Clary. "Clara and I are family, you know. I like to keep an eye on her welfare." Clary's jaw clenched. "I'm doing just fine, thanks." She feigned a sweet tone, though her heart pounded. If Marcus got the slightest hint of deception, he'd pounce. "Don't worry about me." "Of course." Marcus took a step closer, overshadowing them both with his faint cologne. "I'm just curious about how quickly this all came about. You know, rumors travel fast in a town like Hope Springs." His insinuating tone made Clary's stomach twist. She willed herself to stand tall. "When you know," she said, leaning closer to Ethan and hoping the public display of affection looked natural. "Sometimes life moves quickly." Ethan pressed his free hand lightly to the small of Clary's back, a gesture that appeared intimate. "I couldn't be happier," he added, his face entirely impassive, as though unaffected by Marcus's snide undertones. Marcus let out a short laugh, lifting his hands in surrender. "Well, who am I to stand in the way of true love?" Then his eyes hardened. "Take care, cousin. We should talk soon. There are always developments worth discussing." With that, he turned and strode off, leaving Clary's nerves rattled. She allowed herself a shaky breath once he was out of earshot. "He's definitely fishing for something." Ethan nodded, scanning the market as if checking for other potential eavesdroppers. "He'll keep pressing." "But you handled him well." Pasting a stiff smile on her face, Clary guided Ethan toward another stall, her mind racing. Marcus was no fool. He probably had private investigators, or was ready to track Ethan's background. The only chance they had was to maintain a seamless performance. Even so, her chest burned with the weight of these lies. She glanced at Ethan, who was busy paying for a basket of peppers. A small part of her heart softened at how he shielded her, stepping in with unwavering steadiness whenever Marcus's name came up. But she reminded herself this was a contract, not real devotion. She couldn't afford to let her defenses down. If she'd learned anything from her family's past betrayals, it was that illusions could shatter in an instant. Eventually, they finished their rounds. With a truck bed full of produce and enough gossip swirling around them to last weeks, they drove back to Willow Creek. Clary clutched the steering wheel, tension coiled in her shoulders. Yes, the community was curious, and Marcus was clearly suspicious. But for now, their story remained intact. They just had to keep up appearances, no matter how many curious eyes watched their every move. Within a week, Ethan fell into a steady rhythm at Willow Creek. He rose at dawn alongside Clary, moving through chores with unhurried efficiency. By midday, he'd be repairing fences with the ranch hands or tending the livestock. By evening, he and Clary would share a meal, sometimes grilled steaks, sometimes hastily assembled sandwiches, followed by hours spent reviewing finances or planning out tasks for the following day. At first, Clary insisted on maintaining her strict independence. She had always done things her way. Yet she couldn't ignore how Ethan's presence lightened her workload. They replaced a stretch of broken fence posts in half the time it usually took. He mucked out stalls without complaint, pitched in with mechanical repairs on the aging tractor, and even hammered new shingles onto the barn roof with surprising skill. One afternoon, she found him under the hood of a battered ranch truck, grease staining his forearms. A faint grin tugged at her lips. "And didn't know you were handy with engines," she remarked. Ethan shrugged, picked it up along the way. He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's not perfect, but it'll run smoother now." Her eyes flicked to the open engine compartment. "Thanks. That truck's older than I am." She hesitated, then added softly, "I appreciate the help." The words felt almost alien on her tongue, but Ethan merely nodded, not making a big deal of it. Despite their busy days, the nights proved the biggest test of all, forging a believable romantic connection in the eyes of the ranch staff and the ever-watchful community. At Jed's suggestion, they shared dinners in the main house kitchen instead of eating separately. Sometimes the ranch hands teased them good-naturedly, or Jed would toss a sidelong glance that made Clary flush. The entire performance felt strangely domestic, weaving a routine that both comforted and unnerved her. A few days later, they tackled a fence repair far out on the ranch's north end. The sky was a brilliant blue, and the mountains stood tall in the distance. By midday, they paused for a water break beneath a lone cottonwood tree. Ethan pulled off his gloves, his knuckles rough from work. Clary drank from her canteen, then passed it to him, the silent exchange oddly companionable. "How are you holding up?" Ethan asked, voice low. His gaze scanned the horizon, but his words were directed at her. She set her hat on her knee. "All right, I guess. Tired, but the ranch is looking better than ever. Feels good to see progress." He nodded, twisting the canteen's cap. "And about us?" There was no flirtation in his tone, just careful curiosity. Clary stiffened slightly. She knew that question was coming. "It's complicated. You've been doing a great job, but it's strange pretending we're a real couple while also trying to keep distance between us." Ethan studied her for a moment, then replied quietly, "I get it. We're in a tough spot. The wedding license is in the works, and eventually we'll have to stand before a judge or a clerk. Even after that, we'll have to keep up appearances. But I promise I won't pry into your personal life. Just let me know if there's anything I should or shouldn't do." His reassurance eased the tension in her chest. "Thanks," she murmured. "I'm not used to relying on someone else. It's new." A gentle breeze lifted strands of her hair. They shared a moment of silence, the cottonwood leaves rustling overhead. She realized she was grateful he wasn't demanding anything from her beyond the agreement. However, she also felt a nagging guilt that he might be burying his own secrets. Part of her wanted to ask about his past, but fear of crossing boundaries kept her silent. Later that evening, they returned to the house to find Jed in the living room, flipping through a local newspaper. He glanced up. "There's talk about the upcoming annual Hope Springs Hoedown," he said, leaning back in the old armchair. "It's next weekend in the town square. Big dance, local food, all that jazz." Clary's heart sank slightly at the reminder. The hoedown was a cherished event where couples danced under string lights, neighbors gossiped, and everyone dressed in their best Western attire. I forgot it was that time of year, she said flatly. Jed arched an eyebrow. You two should go. Show folks you're part of the community. She glanced at Ethan, who offered a small shrug. I'm games if you are, he said, his expression carefully unreadable. Clary hesitated. The idea of dancing with Ethan in front of the entire town made her palms sweat. Yet, as Jed said, it might help solidify their story. All right, she agreed softly. But let's not make a big spectacle. She remembered last year how she'd watched from the sidelines, feeling both relieved and oddly lonely. Perhaps this time she'd be the one in the spotlight, whether she liked it or not. Over the following days, the prospect of the hoedown lingered like an approaching storm. Locals teased them about dancing together, and Mrs. Gable gushed about how romantic it would be to see the newly engaged couple share a waltz. Clary plastered on a polite grin each time, ignoring the anxious twist in her stomach. She told herself it was just one evening. She could pretend for one evening, right? After all, they were dividing routines now, sharing tasks, orchestrating a joint narrative. Maybe this was just the next step in convincing the world they were in love, even if Clary's heart remained firmly guarded. She had to stay focused on saving Willow Creek, no matter how tangled her emotions became. By the time Saturday arrived, the streets of Hope Springs hummed with excitement for the annual hoedown. String lights crisscrossed above the main square, and makeshift stalls lined the sidewalks, selling everything from grilled corn on the cob to homemade pies. A small stage had been set for the local band, whose fiddles and guitars echoed through the cool evening air. Clary drove into town with Ethan in the passenger seat, the tension between them tangible. She wore a simple denim skirt, boots, and a western blouse embroidered with subtle floral designs, while Ethan sported dark jeans, a plaid shirt, and his trusty cowboy hat. She couldn't help noticing how he looked the picture of a rugged ranch hand. Yet the thought reminded her that it was, in many ways, still an act. They stepped onto the sidewalk, greeted by the sweet aroma of hay bales and roasted meats. Lanterns glowed softly, casting dancing shadows across the pavement. Clary swallowed hard when several neighbors spotted them. An older couple waved, calling out, "Look at you two lovebirds, ready to dance." Ethan offered a friendly nod, placing a hand lightly on Clary's back. "We'll see," he answered, voice warm enough to match the persona they needed to project. Clary felt a flutter in her stomach, uncertain if it was nerves or something else. They made their way around the square, exchanging pleasantries. Mrs. Gable nearly squealed when she spotted them, insisting they try her homemade sugar cookies. Clary thanked her, smiling through an onslaught of nosy questions. All the while, she clung to Ethan's arm, maintaining the illusion of a happy, soon-to-be-married couple. Eventually, the band struck up a lively tune, fiddles and banjos resonating across the open space. People gathered to dance, forming pairs that spun and stepped in time to the energetic beat. Clary tried to slip away to the sidelines, but her plan was foiled by a persistent neighbor who practically dragged her and Ethan to the center. With a reluctant smile, she allowed Ethan to place one hand at her waist and clasp her free hand in his. The moment felt surreal, her chest tight with anxiety as the crowd around them hooted and clapped. But Ethan's grip was steady, and his gaze reassuring. "Just follow my lead," he murmured over the music. She nodded, feeling a wave of self-consciousness. But as they moved through the steps, something unexpected happened. Her body started to relax. The swirl of skirts, the stomp of boots, the laughter echoing in the night. Somehow, it all fused into a heady atmosphere of celebration. Ethan guided her gently, careful not to force any elaborate moves. They spun in a small circle beneath the warm glow of paper lanterns. At one turn, Clary caught sight of Marcus on the outskirts of the crowd, watching them with narrowed eyes. A chill of defiance rippled through her. If he wanted to see a real couple, they'd give him one. She leaned closer to Ethan, letting a bright laugh escape her lips as he dipped her smoothly. Around them, neighbors cheered, shouting playful encouragement. Clary realized that, for a fleeting instant, she was almost enjoying herself. The tension in her shoulders eased, replaced by a gentle warmth that spread through her chest. When the song ended, the dancers paused to applaud the band. Clary found herself face to face with Ethan, breathing a little faster than usual. His hat tipped back just enough to reveal perspiration at his temple, and his eyes crinkled with a hint of a smile. The rush of the moment hung between them, leaving her uncharacteristically speechless. "That was fun," Ethan said softly, his voice nearly lost in the excited chatter around them. She managed a nod, swallowing. "Yeah," she admitted, surprising herself. "Not bad at all." They stepped off the makeshift dance floor, and neighbors clapped them on the back, crowing about how natural they looked together. With flushed cheeks, Clary accepted compliments, though a small, cautious part of her brain reminded her this was all a show. Even so, she couldn't deny the exhilaration in her veins. Ethan guided her toward a quieter corner, where a wooden bench rested beneath a string of fairy lights. They collapsed onto it, heartbeats gradually calming. A handful of passers-by waved or smiled, likely under the impression they were witnessing a tender romantic moment. A wry smile tugged at Clary's lips. "We probably convinced half the town tonight," he exhaled in relief, removing his hat to run a hand through his damp hair. "I'd say that's mission accomplished." Suddenly, a familiar voice cut in from behind. "Well, aren't you two quite the dancers?" It was Marcus, hands casually tucked in his pockets. His polished boots looked absurd in the dusty street. "You look downright convincing out there." Clary tensed, ignoring the taunt. "We were just enjoying the evening. You should try it sometime." Marcus chuckled, but it held little humor. "Oh, I enjoy plenty, but I'd hate to intrude on your grand performance." His gaze swept over them with a knowing glint. Then he nodded curtly. "Have a good night, cousin, Mr. Walker." He strolled away, leaving behind an undercurrent of tension. Ethan exhaled. "He's definitely not buying this easily." Clary shook her head. "No. But if we keep this up, maybe we can hold him off long enough. He can't prove anything if we stay consistent." They rose to return to the crowd, carefully maintaining the facade of an affectionate couple. As the next tune started, the streetlights above flickered in the summer breeze, and Clary let Ethan lead her back onto the dance floor. Another swirl of steps, another wave of laughter. Despite the threat lurking at the edges of her consciousness, for that brief moment under the lanterns and stars, she allowed herself to feel a spark of genuine happiness, one that caught her completely off guard. Time moved with unnerving speed after the Hope Springs hoedown. The memories of dancing under lanterns lingered in Clary's mind, leaving her unsettled by the enjoyment she'd felt. But any momentary delight was overshadowed by the looming reality that her 29th birthday and the Will's marriage deadline was only a month away. She and Ethan sat in the ranch's small office, papers strewn across the battered wooden desk. The midday sun filtered through dusty windows, illuminating stacks of documents, the marriage license application, property records, even the half-completed guest list for a quick civil ceremony. They would make this union official soon, and part of her mind reeled at the thought. "We need these forms submitted by next week," Ethan said, tapping the top sheet. "That'll give the courthouse time to process them before your birthday." He kept his tone even, but Clary noticed a flicker of concern in his eyes, almost as if he worried for her peace of mind as much as he worried for the legalities. She nodded, exhaling. "Right. I'll call the county clerk and set an appointment." Swallowing, she tried to sound matter-of-fact, but her voice trembled slightly. A knock sounded at the half-open door. Jed eased it wider, stepping in with his usual purposeful gait. "Hope I'm not interrupting," he said, though the lines on his face suggested he already knew exactly what they were discussing. Just wanted to let you know Marcus dropped by earlier, sniffing around the stables. He asked a lot of questions about your marriage plans. Clary stiffened, feeling her pulse spike. And what did you tell him? Jed shrugged. That y'all are getting hitched soon, didn't offer any more details. He planted his hands on his hips. He didn't look happy, kept muttering something about verifying the marriage's validity. Wouldn't be surprised if he's cooking up a scheme. Ethan's gaze shifted from Jed to Clary, his expression serious. We'll just have to be ready. Once the license is official, he can threaten all he wants, but he won't have legal footing if it's done by the books. Clary felt an anxious knot twist in her stomach. I know. She rubbed her forehead, suddenly weary. I just wish it didn't feel so rushed. Weddings aren't supposed to be like a chore on a checklist. Jed offered a sympathetic smile. No, they ain't. But you're doing what you must. As Jed left them alone, Ethan gently placed a hand on Clary's arm. I can handle a lot of the details if you like. You've got enough on your plate with the ranch? His voice was warm, unpressing. She blinked up at him, fighting a swirl of gratitude and discomfort. Thank you, she managed. I appreciate the offer. This arrangement wasn't supposed to be so hard on my nerves. You're carrying the weight of your family's legacy, Ethan replied softly. Anyone would feel pressure. Clary nodded, then cleared her throat to break the intensity of the moment. All right. So, the license next week? A discreet ceremony a few days after. We can invite Jed, maybe Mrs. Gable to keep it local, but not too big. I just want it done without turning it into town gossip. Ethan agreed. Sounds right. I'll let you decide who else to include. In the meantime, let me help around the ranch so you can focus on finalizing everything. They left the office to tackle the day's tasks. While Ethan headed out to repair a distant fence line, Clary checked the tack room in the barn, ensuring everything was in order. Marcus's visit echoed in her thoughts. He must sense that they were close to sealing the deal, and that knowledge would only make him more determined to find some flaw. She prayed that they'd fooled him well enough, yet a nagging voice reminded her that secrets, if they existed on Ethan's side, could blow everything apart. Later in the afternoon, Clary found herself gazing out at the corrals, the sun beating down on the parched ground. Her earlier dance with Ethan at the hoedown sprang to mind, the warmth of his hand, the steadiness of his lead. She shook off the memory, reminding herself that this was about saving Willow Creek, not indulging in daydreams. But it wasn't easy when the lines between necessity and genuine connection were beginning to blur. She saddled her mare and rode out to where Ethan worked. He was mending the sagging wire in the far north pasture, hat shading his face from the relentless sun. The rhythmic clang of his hammer on fence posts carried on the breeze. As she approached, he looked up, offering a slight grin. Thought you might need some water, she said, lifting a canteen from her saddlebag. He set down the hammer, dusting off his jeans. Thanks. After taking a long drink, he wiped his mouth, studying her from beneath the brim of his hat. You okay? You seemed distracted earlier. She grimaced. Just anxious. Everything's happening so fast. The license, the ceremony, Marcus hovering. Sometimes it feels like I can't breathe. Ethan nodded understandingly, handing the canteen back. We're almost there, Clary. Once we get that certificate, your cousin loses his leverage. She appreciated his optimism. Let's hope so. Then, glancing at the hammered-in fence posts, she attempted a small smile. You've done a lot here. It looks good. Glad to help, he said simply. The ranch is shaping up nicely. They talked a bit more about daily tasks, but an unspoken tension hummed between them, an awareness that soon they'd be legally bound, facing the town as husband and wife. For Clary, the biggest question was, what would come after? Would Ethan vanish the moment the inheritance was secure, or would they maintain the ruse indefinitely? As the sun dipped toward the horizon, they rode back together, side by side, in a companionable quiet. Clary stared at the big sky, painted with oranges and pinks, trying to steady her heart. In less than a month, she'd legally be Mrs. Walker. The date approached like a train she couldn't stop, and whether or not it brought relief or regret was an answer still out of reach. A crisp wind swept over Willow Creek Ranch that evening, hinting of cooler weather to come. Shadows stretched across the fields, and the fading sunlight cast the main house in a gentle glow. Clary found Ethan in the living room, flipping through a binder of ranch maintenance records. The day's dust still clung to his boots, but his posture was relaxed, as though he had finally found a sense of home in these wooden walls. Clary hesitated in the doorway, heart fluttering with an odd mix of emotions. She cleared her throat to announce her presence. "Hey," she said softly. Ethan looked up, offering a warm, if reserved, smile. "Hey, I was just checking on the budget for fence repairs. It's all in better shape than I expected." She stepped into the room, the old floorboards creaking underfoot. "I appreciate you staying on top of that." Her gaze drifted to a framed photograph on the mantel, an image of her grandfather beaming as he held a lasso, the ranch stretching behind him. That photo had always reminded her of why she fought so hard to keep Willow Creek. But tonight, it reminded her of how alone she felt, how precarious her future seemed. Quietly, Ethan shut the binder and set it aside. "You've done wonders here, Clary. I know this situation isn't what you wanted, but you're saving your family's legacy." She swallowed. "I guess, some days, I'm not sure if I'm doing the right thing or just prolonging the inevitable. And then there's—" She trailed off, forcing herself to stay guarded. His expression softened with concern. "We can talk about it if you want. I'm here." Those last words ignited a swirl of conflicting desires inside her, the need to protect her heart, but also a deep yearning to let someone in. She lowered her gaze, focusing on a small nick in the wooden floor. "I don't usually open up to people," she admitted, voice tight. "After everything that happened with my family's finances, after nearly losing the ranch once, I just built walls." Ethan shifted on the couch, leaning forward slightly. "Walls keep you safe, but they can be lonely." She let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, they are." She braced herself, then sank into the old armchair across from him. The single lamp by the window offered a gentle glow, casting the room in an intimate hush. "Honestly, I never pictured myself marrying anyone, fake or otherwise. Yet here we are, about to sign legal papers." Her heart pounded as she spoke the truth she'd been dodging for weeks. She noticed Ethan's jaw flex almost imperceptibly, as though he wrestled with his own thoughts. "If it's any consolation," he said quietly, "I didn't expect to be in this situation either, but it's not all bad, is it?" He watched her with earnest eyes. She inhaled, searching for words. "No," she admitted, barely above a whisper. "It's not all bad. You've been a decent partner, more than decent, actually." Their gazes locked, the lamplight highlighting faint worry lines near his eyes. "I'm glad," he said, his voice low. "I know we agreed to keep things businesslike, but sometimes it feels—" He paused, as though rethinking how much to reveal. Clary's pulse quickened, suspecting the direction of his thoughts. Her mind flashed back to the night they danced at the hoedown, to the closeness she'd felt in his arms. Tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, she struggled to steady her breath. "Sometimes it feels like we're crossing lines," she finished for him, her tone tight with uncertainty. "And that scares me, because we both know this is temporary." Ethan's eyes flickered with something akin to regret, or maybe longing. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he said softly. If we keep it strictly about saving the ranch, I can do that. Just tell me what you need." A wave of conflicting feelings crashed inside her. The last thing she wanted was to push away someone who had shown her genuine kindness. Yet how could she risk more heartbreak, especially when she knew so little of his past or intentions beyond this arrangement? She rose abruptly, walking toward the window. Outside, stars were beginning to pierce the twilight. "I need to know that once this is over, you won't vanish or do something to hurt the ranch," she confessed, her voice catching. "I've seen enough betrayal in my lifetime." He stood too, moving closer with slow caution. "Clary, I'm not here to betray you, I promise." He hesitated, and she sensed he wanted to reveal more, but he stopped, pressing his lips together. Thunder whispered in the distance, a subtle rumble across the wide Montana sky. Clary turned, meeting Ethan's gaze. The flicker of an unspoken connection passed between them, one that both drew her in and warned her away. In the hush that followed, they hovered in that fragile liminal space, uncertain if crossing the line from pretense to something more would heal them or tear them apart. She could almost imagine leaning forward, letting him hold her, bridging the distance between their hearts. But fear roiled beneath her ribs, reminding her of the cost of trusting someone too deeply. At last, she exhaled shakily. "I believe you, Ethan. For now, that's all I can say." She offered a tremulous smile. He nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "That's enough." They stood like that for a moment, the night spreading its hush around the ranch house. And though neither spoke of it directly, they both felt the weight of the question that loomed in the silence. Was this partnership truly just a means to an end? Or was it becoming something far more real than either of them intended? A cold snap rolled through Montana that week, bringing brisk winds and a scattering of early autumn leaves across the ranch yard. The sudden chill only heightened the sense of urgency swirling around Willow Creek. Clary's birthday crept closer with each passing day. She and Ethan had a date set at the courthouse in 2 weeks, barely enough time to file the license and stand before a judge to make it official. Marcus, on the other hand, seemed more persistent than ever. He had not openly confronted Clary again, but word spread that he'd hired an investigator to poke around. The tension weighed on her like a thick fog, fueling her every decision. She refused to let him find any reason to challenge her claim to the ranch. That resolve carried her into Ethan's room one afternoon, entirely by accident. She was searching for a missing pair of fence pliers he'd borrowed earlier, or so he'd said. The door was ajar, and she lightly rapped her knuckles. "Ethan!" she called, pushing it open when he didn't answer. The room was tidy, spare in decoration, as if Ethan hadn't fully settled. A duffel bag slouched in one corner, and on the small dresser sat a plain wooden box. She scanned the top of the desk, but no pliers. Her brow furrowed, noticing a polished leather folder beneath a flannel shirt draped on the chair. Something about the folder looked conspicuously out of place amid the other unremarkable items. She hesitated. She'd never meant to snoop, but curiosity pricked at her. Carefully, she lifted the folded shirt, revealing the folder's embossed cover, E.W. Holdings, Inc., was stamped on the lower right corner. Her pulse quickened. E.W. For Ethan Walker, obviously. Maybe some old business documents. But what business? The silence of the room spurred her to act. She set the shirt aside and opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were clippings from major financial publications, Forbes, Wall Street Journal, technology magazines. Page after page featured references to a certain Ethan Walker, a CEO with an impressive net worth. There were photos, a younger Ethan in a tailored suit, stepping off a private jet, shaking hands with industry giants. A sinking, electric jolt shot through her. In an instant, the entire puzzle of his calm confidence, his polished aura, even the understated courtesy he carried himself with, everything clicked into place. He's not just some random ranch worker. He's a millionaire, maybe a billionaire. Her mind reeled at the realization. The date on one particularly damning newspaper article was only a year old. It mentioned an unexpected sabbatical from corporate life, speculation about tension with shareholders, and rumors of a cancelled engagement to a wealthy socialite. Clary's hand trembled as she flipped through the documents. This man was no ordinary ranch hand. He was an empire builder in disguise. A noise from the hall made her freeze. She slammed the folder shut and spun around, heart hammering in her chest. The door creaked as Ethan entered, stopping short the moment he saw her. Their eyes met, her expression one of shock and betrayal. "Clary," he began, clearly grasping the situation in an instant. "I can explain." She felt her breath catch in her throat, anger rising like a storm. "Explain what exactly? That you're some tech mogul who came here to, what, hide out? Play cowboy?" Her voice shook, a mixture of hurt and fury. Memories of past betrayals flared like hot embers, fueling her indignation. "When were you going to tell me the truth?" Ethan took a step forward, palms up in a gesture of surrender. "I was going to," he insisted, voice tight. "But not like this. I didn't want to complicate things." Her hazel eyes flashed. "Complicate things?" She lifted the folder, brandishing it like evidence in a courtroom. "You let me think you were just some drifter looking for honest work. You've been lying this whole time." "I never lied," he retorted, though his voice cracked. "I omitted details. Yes, I left a major tech company in Seattle to escape. I was suffocated by that life, fake people, endless demands. Coming here, doing real work on a ranch, it felt liberating. Then I saw your ad and—" She cut him off, voice raw. "And you figured you'd just slip in quietly, never letting me know I was hiring a millionaire. Is this some game to you? I can't believe I was stupid enough to trust you." "Clary, wait," Ethan pleaded, stepping closer. "It's not a game. My money, my corporate past, they're the last things I want. I was prepared to live anonymously. The only reason I didn't tell you was because I was afraid you'd reject my help, or that you'd think I was doing this for some ulterior motive." "Maybe you do have an ulterior motive," she snapped, tears threatening. "Just like everyone else who's ever used me or my family for personal gain." Her words slammed the room into silence. Outside, the wind rattled the window. Ethan's face fell, regret carving lines into his features. "That's not true. I care about you, about Willow Creek. I was planning to come clean, but it never seemed like the right moment. Then we got closer, and I was afraid if I told you, you'd hate me for hiding it." She stared at him, chest heaving. A swirl of confusion raged inside her. She recalled every small kindness he'd shown, every moment they'd shared that felt genuine, yet the weight of her past heartbreaks roared louder. "I need you to leave," she said in a low, quivering voice. His eyes widened. "Clary, just go," she insisted, stepping aside to open the door wide. Anger and hurt mingled in her trembling body. "You lied by omission, Ethan, and you know how I feel about trusting people. I can't do this." "Get out." Ethan stood there for a moment, torn, looking like he wanted to say something else, but her clenched jaw and blazing gaze offered no mercy. Slowly, he nodded, grabbing the folder from her grip. "I'll pack my things," he whispered, voice thick with regret. As he vanished down the hall, Clary sank onto the edge of the bed, tears burning hot against her eyes. The damning phrase echoed in her mind. Simple girl precisava de marido de mentira. Il cowboy que contratou era milionário escondido. She had literally fulfilled the nightmare scenario from her grandfather's will, entrusting everything to a man whose truth she never really knew. Clary paced the length of the living room that night, replaying her argument with Ethan in her head. Her heart pounded with equal measures of fury and heartbreak. She had allowed him close, closer than she'd allowed anyone in years. And all along, he'd harbored a massive secret. Though he hadn't physically left Willow Creek just yet, he was packing his truck. Jed had tried to speak with her, but she brushed him off, too raw to form coherent explanations. She feared that if Jed pressured her, she'd either collapse into tears or lash out. She just needed time to think. Late in the evening, she slipped outside, away from the prying eyes of the ranch hands who lingered in the bunkhouse, buzzing with gossip about the tension they sensed. The sky stretched infinitely above her, black velvet dotted with stars. She breathed in the cool air, hoping it would calm the storm in her chest. Her thoughts flicked back to the night before she discovered Ethan's secret. They had shared a quiet moment on the porch, almost confessing unspoken feelings. She clenched her fists now at the memory, feeling betrayed by her own heart. Footsteps crunched on the gravel behind her. She spun, half expecting Ethan. Instead, Jed appeared, concern etched into his lined face. "I know you said you wanted space," he said softly, stopping a respectful distance away, "but I can't let you spiral alone." Clary's shoulders sagged. Of all people, Jed deserved some explanation. "I found out Ethan's not who he said he was," she managed, crossing her arms over her chest. "He's some big-time tech CEO, apparently, rich beyond reason. He lied to me. Jed." Everything about him was a lie. Jed stroked his mustache, eyes full of sympathy. "He never seemed to lie about work. Boy's done a fine job on the ranch. But yes, that's a mighty big thing to hide." Anger burned through her tears. "I can't believe I fell for his act. He was probably laughing at me this whole time. Simple ranch girl, easy to fool." She hated the bitter edge in her voice, but the pain refused to subside. Jed shook his head. "I doubt that. He's always been genuine in how he speaks to you. Doesn't strike me as the type to mock you behind your back. Maybe he was ashamed of that life, or just needed a break from it." She swallowed, tears pressing at the corners of her eyes. "I don't know what to believe." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "All I know is that my heart, it hurts, Jed. I trusted him. And now it feels like every fear I've ever had about betrayal, about letting someone in, just got confirmed again." Jed reached out a hand, gently resting it on her shoulder. "I wish I had the right words to fix this, but Clary, you've been so guarded for good reason. If he truly cares, maybe he had reasons too, reasons that don't involve hurting you." She inhaled, letting the crisp night air fill her lungs. "He said he cared, but what if it's another lie? The wedding's supposed to be soon. Now everything's ruined." She stared at the dark outline of the barn. "Marcus will swoop in and claim fraud. He'll get Willow Creek, and it's all my fault for trusting the wrong person." Jed squeezed her shoulder gently. "What do you want to do? If you send Ethan packing, you'll need to find another solution fast. Your birthday's right around the corner." A hollow sense of dread pounded in her chest. She thought about the day they danced at the hoedown, the way Ethan had quietly protected her from Marcus's insinuations, the nights he spent mending fences, his unrelenting support. Had that all been a facade, or had parts of it been real? "I don't know," she whispered. Her pride told her to kick Ethan out, never look back. But the ranch's survival might hinge on continuing the marriage plan, and a small part of her, some foolish, hopeful part, didn't want him to go. She hated that part of herself for being so vulnerable. Jed stepped back, giving her space. "Think on it, Clary. Don't let your pain make decisions you'll regret. Talk to him if you need answers. If you still want him gone afterward, so be it. But face him first." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, nodding reluctantly. "Maybe. I just need a little more time." "Understood," Jed said, voice soft as he turned to head back inside. "I'm always around if you need me." Left in the silence, Clary gazed at the stars. She remembered the countless nights she'd stood in that very spot, praying for a miracle to keep Willow Creek afloat. Then Ethan arrived. A miracle in disguise, except the disguise turned out to be bigger than she could handle. Could she look past the deception and salvage not only the ranch, but also her own battered heart? A light flicked on in the bunkhouse, and through a distant window, she glimpsed Ethan's silhouette moving around, presumably packing. That image twisted her insides. She wanted to confront him, to demand a fuller explanation of who he was and why he'd hidden so much. But she wasn't ready, not yet. The night air provided a temporary refuge from the storm of questions swirling in her mind. In the distance, a coyote howled, the plaintive sound echoing the ache deep in her chest. Tomorrow she'd have to decide. For tonight, all she could do was stare at the dark horizon and wonder what the dawn might bring. At sunrise, Clary awoke with an ache in her ribs, as though she'd slept curled around her heartbreak. She dragged herself out of bed, knowing she couldn't hide in her room forever. If Ethan truly was leaving, she needed to confront him before Marcus seized the opportunity to declare the entire marriage plan a sham. She dressed hurriedly in jeans and a flannel shirt, tension knotting her stomach. Downstairs, the house was eerily quiet, except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock. Jed was likely out tending morning chores. Taking a deep breath, Clary moved toward the guest room where Ethan had stayed. The door stood ajar, revealing an empty space except for a lone duffel bag and scattered personal items on the small desk. Ethan was folding a shirt with robotic motions. The lines of his shoulders slumped. At her soft knock, he turned, sorrow etched into his features. The old tension flared between them. "I didn't expect you so soon," he said, voice guarded. "I figured you'd want me gone before you woke up." Clary paused, swallowing against the thickness in her throat. "I came to hear your explanation." Her eyes flicked to the half-packed duffel. "You owe me that much." Ethan set down the shirt. "You already know the big picture. I'm not just some drifter. I ran a tech company, made more money than I knew what to do with, got engaged to someone who never cared about me, only my status. After the wedding fell apart, I realized I hated who I'd become. I needed an escape. So I left Seattle, left everything. I wanted to find something real, something honest." He swallowed, his gaze meeting hers. "Then I saw your ad. I thought maybe this was a chance to live differently. So I showed up as the man I wished to be, not the one I used to be. It was selfish, I guess, but I was desperate for a normal life." She studied him, anger and pain still swirling in her chest. "If you wanted honesty, you should have told me." "I know." Regret weighed in his voice. "But the second I realized how important Willow Creek was to you, how fragile the situation was, I panicked. I knew if you found out I was wealthy, you'd either push me away or assume I was plotting something. I wanted to prove I could care about this ranch, about you, without all that baggage." Clary's heart twisted painfully. Part of her understood his logic. Another part felt a fresh wave of betrayal. "So you're saying you did this out of some noble desire to reinvent yourself?" He brushed a hand over his face, exhaling shakily. "I don't claim to be noble. I just didn't want to lose the one real thing I'd found in a long time. Every day here felt right, like I was finally contributing instead of making deals in boardrooms." His eyes brimmed with sincerity. She looked away, tears blurring her vision. He'd said he cared about her, about the ranch. Could that be genuine? The memory of him fixing fences, cooking dinner together, dancing under the hoedown lights, all came rushing back. Each image clashed with the sting of knowing he'd concealed a fortune and an entire other life. Her jaw tensed. "Regardless, you lied. You saw my vulnerabilities, my fear of betrayal, and chose secrecy." Ethan winced, nodding. Yes, and I'm so sorry. I never meant to harm you. If you need me gone, I'll go. I won't fight it. But if there's any chance we can still help each other, I'm willing to stay and do whatever it takes to prove myself." Silence settled, broken only by the distant sound of horses nickering outside. Clary's mind reeled. If she forced him out, she'd lose her best shot at preserving Willow Creek from Marcus. But how could she continue a facade with a man whose secret had reignited her worst fears? A sudden rap at the front door startled them both. Clary left the room, heart pounding, to answer it. Marcus Thorne stood on the porch, dressed in a crisp shirt and polished boots, a smug grin on his face. A man in a suit, likely an investigator, hovered behind him. "Morning, cousin," Marcus said, stepping inside uninvited. His eyes gleamed with triumph. "I heard rumors there's trouble in paradise. Thought I'd drop by, see if we can settle some matters." Clary's face burned. "What do you want?" He spread his arms. "Oh, just checking on your soon-to-be wedding. If it's not happening, I'll gladly expedite the sale of Willow Creek. I have an offer ready, quite generous." Ethan appeared in the hallway, jaw tight. Marcus's gaze flicked to him, a sneer curling his lip. "Ah, the mystery cowboy. My investigator here has dug up some interesting details about you, Mr. Walker. Surprising details, shall we say?" Clary's stomach twisted. Of course, Marcus had discovered Ethan's true identity. Soon, the whole town would know. Her mind raced. There would be no more illusions. If she ended it now, Marcus would claim she'd staged a fraudulent marriage attempt. If she stuck by Ethan, their relationship would be under intense scrutiny. Either way, the ranch teetered on the brink. "It's none of your business," she managed through clenched teeth. "We're still getting married." Marcus arched an eyebrow. "Is that so? And does dear Ethan see it that way?" He threw Ethan a mocking glance. Ethan stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Yes," he said, voice firm. "We do intend to marry. Our arrangement stands." He glanced at Clary, a plea in his eyes for her to confirm. Her throat felt tight, anger and desperation warring in her chest, yet something in Ethan's sincerity and the pressing threat of Marcus forced her hand. "Yes," she repeated, unsteady but resolute. "We'll be married before my birthday, just like we planned." Marcus's mouth curved in a cold smile. "Well, then, I'll be watching closely, cousin." He tipped an imaginary hat and strode out, his investigator trailing behind. The door slammed shut. Ethan exhaled, turning to Clary. She stood there shaking, tears threatening to spill. Their ruse would continue, but the betrayal still burned hot. "We'll talk later," she said, voice hollow. "Right now I need a moment." She hurried away, leaving Ethan in the front hall, duffel bag still partially packed. Her world had crashed into disillusionment. Yet ironically, the marriage plot had to go on, or they'd lose everything. The heartbreak was almost unbearable, but with time running out, there was no space for easy answers, only the promise of a fraught path ahead. From the moment Marcus left the ranch house, Clary felt as though a trap door had opened beneath her feet. The front door clicked shut behind him, the ominous echo lingering in the hallway like a warning shot. She stood there, arms limp at her sides, listening to the fading crunch of gravel under Marcus's expensive boots as he strode toward his car. Ethan hovered near the stairs, his duffel bag still partially packed, conflicted eyes reflecting guilt and worry. Outside, a chill wind rustled through the yard. Clary fought the urge to chase after Marcus, to scream at him that she wouldn't surrender Willow Creek, but in her heart she knew words would be useless. He had the upper hand. Marcus had discovered Ethan's true identity, and soon enough the entire town, or at least the local court, would know. If they abandoned the marriage plan now, it would confirm every suspicion of fraud. If they went through with it, the legitimacy of their union would be dissected under a microscope. "Clary," Ethan said softly, drawing her attention. I can stay if you still need. She cut him off with a raised hand, emotions swirling too violently for words. Retreating into the living room, she stared at the fireplace, wishing her grandfather's portrait could speak and tell her what to do. She felt betrayed by Ethan, yet desperate not to lose everything she'd sacrificed so much to protect. Jed appeared in the entryway, hat in hand. I saw Marcus drive off with that smug look on his face. What happened? Clary swallowed hard, blinking back tears. He knows Ethan's real identity. He brought some investigator around, basically threatening that if we don't follow through, the ranch is his. Jed's jaw tightened. That snake. I'm sorry, kiddo. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, as if the final thread of her composure snapped, Clary sank onto the couch. She pressed the heels of her palms against her eyes, trying to quell the sting of tears. The hopelessness she'd kept at bay now rushed over her. If she and Ethan dissolved the arrangement, the ranch would certainly fall into Marcus's hands. If they continued it, her broken trust in Ethan hung between them like a dark cloud. We still have some time, Ethan ventured gently, stepping closer. It's not over yet. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. You think a few weeks is enough to fix all this? My entire life, I've been betrayed by people who had hidden agendas. And now you stroll in, rich, powerful, and hiding everything, only to claim you were just trying to live differently. Maybe you meant well, but that doesn't erase what you did. His face registered the blow, but he managed to hold her gaze. I know. I truly regret keeping it from you, but we can't let Marcus win. Jed cleared his throat, glancing between them. Clary, losing the ranch is unthinkable. You told me yourself you'd do whatever it takes. And you've come too far to let it slip away. His tone was gentle but firm. She stared at the dusty rug beneath her boots, remembering the vow she'd made to her grandfather and to herself. Willow Creek would never be sold on her watch. Another memory rose. A young Clary standing in the barn, trembling with fear after her father's crooked partner nearly destroyed them. She'd promised she would never let that happen again. Yet the cost of continuing this farce with Ethan felt immeasurable. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. You hurt me, she said, the words shaking. It's not just the ranch. I let you in, and you hid such a huge part of yourself. Ethan exhaled. I know. And if you can't forgive me, I'll leave, but I'm begging you to consider that I might have genuinely cared about you, about this place. Don't let Marcus swoop in because of my stupidity. The tears finally spilled from her eyes, hot and bitter. She turned away, feeling Jed's hand on her shoulder in a comforting gesture. Just give me a minute, she whispered. She stood and trudged to the porch, letting the wind dry her cheeks. From here, the ranch spread out in rolling fields, dotted with horses grazing peacefully despite the storm raging in Clary's heart. The thought of Marcus dividing and selling the land weighed on her chest like a boulder. She recalled childhood rides with her grandfather, the lessons about ranch stewardship, the pride she took in every sunrise spent working these fields. Behind her, the door opened softly. Ethan's footsteps approached, but halted at a polite distance. Jed's gone to check on the cattle, he murmured. I'm here if you need to talk. Clary stiffened, forcing herself to remain calm. I can't do this alone, she said at last, voice shaking, but I also can't pretend I'm not furious. He drew nearer, still maintaining space, as though afraid to spook her. I won't ask you to pretend everything's fine, but we can push through this for the next few weeks, secure your inheritance, and then figure out where we stand, whether that's a clean break or something else. Her shoulders trembled. And what if Marcus tries to use your secret as evidence of fraud? Ethan's expression hardened. He can't, legally, if our marriage is genuine in the eyes of the law. My finances aren't illegal. All he can do is attempt to claim it's a sham if we act like we hate each other. But if we stand firm, show unity, at least for now, Marcus's investigator won't find a legal reason to void the will. Clary squeezed her eyes shut. The path forward was clear, yet agonizing. Keep the ruse alive, swallow her hurt, and publicly maintain that Ethan was her fiancé. It felt like the ultimate betrayal of her own emotions, but losing the ranch would be worse. She opened her eyes, focusing on the horizon as if it could offer strength. "Fine," she said, the word emerging like a sigh of defeat. "We'll do what we must, but don't expect forgiveness overnight." Ethan's posture relaxed a fraction. "I understand. Thank you for letting me stay. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." She nodded stiffly, tears still glistening. Together, they stood on the porch, a painful alliance forged out of necessity. Overhead, clouds drifted across a pale sky, indifferent to the turmoil below. Clary could almost feel the ranch itself, holding its breath, waiting for the resolution it deserved. And in that quiet moment, she vowed that no matter her private heartbreak, Willow Creek would not be ripped away on her watch. Over the next several days, Clary moved through life in a daze of hollow resolve. The wedding paperwork still sat on her desk, a ticking time bomb that needed to be filed soon. Each morning, she rose before dawn to work the ranch, forcing herself to coordinate tasks with Ethan as though they were nothing but practical partners. Every conversation was tinged with the chill of unspoken hurt. But gradually, tiny sparks of resilience began to glow. She caught herself refusing to buckle under the strain, remembering the day her grandfather taught her how to rope a calf. "You gotta face the struggle head-on, Clary." His voice echoed in her mind. "A true rancher never quits, no matter the odds." During a meeting with Mr. Albright, the family lawyer, she pressed for any legal advantage they might have. He studied the will again, humming thoughtfully. "It clearly states you must be married. If we prove you entered into this union in good faith, Marcus won't have grounds to contest. I'd suggest not letting him see any cracks in your resolve." Clary managed a tight nod. "We'll handle it." Later that afternoon, she found Ethan in the barn, fixing the latch on a stall door. The late summer light slanted across the hay-strewn floor, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. She paused, watching him work. His hair hung in messy waves around his temples, and his shirt sleeves were rolled up to reveal tan forearms. He looked so at home doing manual labor, completely different from the suave corporate figure in those photos she'd discovered. She cleared her throat. "We need to talk about the ceremony. The courthouse clerk scheduled us for the day after tomorrow." He set aside his tools, meeting her gaze. "All right. How do you want to handle it?" Despite the lingering ache in her chest, she mustered calm. "Quick, simple. Jed can witness. We can invite Mrs. Gable if we need another witness, just so it's valid. No frills, no fuss." He nodded. "Understood. I'll keep it low-key." She crossed her arms over her torso, searching his eyes. "Why are you staying?" she asked, voice softer than she intended. "You found a way out the moment I confronted you, but you're still here even after I told you to go." A flicker of emotion passed through his gaze, regret, tenderness, hope. "Because I'm not a coward, Clary. I messed up, but I won't run from it. And I won't leave you to fight Marcus alone." An unwelcome warmth stirred in her chest. She quickly buried it, nodding in acknowledgement. "Tomorrow, we'll gather everything we need for the clerk's office. After that, we'll see." Ethan nodded. "We will." They spent the rest of the day ensuring the ranch's finances were stable. Jed quietly offered moral support, though Clary sensed his relief that she and Ethan were holding the plan together. As night fell, Clary reviewed the wedding license paperwork one last time. Each signature line felt like a noose tightening around her decisions, saving Willow Creek at the cost of a sham marriage with a man who broke her trust. but who might also be her only true ally. When the morning arrived, a crisp breeze greeted them. The drive to the county courthouse in a neighboring town felt surreal. Clary gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, while Ethan sat silently beside her. In the back seat, Jed fiddled with his hat, occasionally offering a reassuring nod. The courthouse was a modest brick building with a small parking lot. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed, and the linoleum floors echoed their footsteps. A woman at the front desk directed them to a waiting area where they filled out final forms. Clary's heart hammered, each pen stroke reminiscent of finalizing a business deal. But this is bigger than business. It's my life. Finally, a clerk ushered them into a tidy chamber where a magistrate performed simple civil ceremonies. Mrs. Gable appeared, eager to witness, her eyes shining with both curiosity and genuine fondness for Clary. The entire scene felt simultaneously rushed and momentous. The magistrate, an older man with a kindly expression, introduced himself and read the standard vows. Clary's mind whirled. She glanced at Ethan. His jaw was set, yet tenderness underlined his gaze. As the magistrate requested their consent, Clary managed a murmured, "I do," though tears pricked her eyes. Ethan's quiet, "I do" followed, his voice steady. They exchanged rings, small, practical bands. Her hands trembled as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a symbolic gesture that would confine her to a marriage she wasn't sure she believed in. And yet, a part of her recognized that they were forging a bond that might just outlive the legal arrangement if they could find trust again. When the magistrate declared them officially married, Clary forced herself to breathe. Jed shook Ethan's hand, and Mrs. Gable let out a joyful squeal, hugging Clary tight. The woman then demanded they at least share a kiss to seal the deal. Heat flooded Clary's cheeks, but under the watchful eyes of the small group, she leaned toward Ethan. Their lips brushed briefly, a chaste, trembling contact. It sparked a flutter of sorrow and hope in her chest, leaving her both relieved and utterly off balance. Moments later, they stood on the courthouse steps, a gust of wind rustling their clothes. The sun shone deceptively bright, as though the world celebrated while Clary's insides churned in uncertainty. The ceremony was done. The papers were signed. She was now Mrs. Ethan Walker. Jed cleared his throat, placing a hand on Clary's shoulder. "We did what we had to do. You okay, kid?" She swallowed hard, staring at the ring on her finger. "I'll manage." Turning to Ethan, she met his gaze, a complex storm of emotions tightening her chest. "Now we have to deal with Marcus and everything else." Ethan nodded, slipping an arm gently around her waist for the benefit of onlookers. The contact made her heart flutter in confusion, but she allowed it. They descended the courthouse steps into the next stage of this fragile alliance, uncertain whether it would crumble under the weight of their secrets or stand strong enough to protect them both. They drove back to Willow Creek Ranch in near silence, the newly signed marriage license sealed in an official envelope on the dashboard. Every so often, Mrs. Gable would pepper them with cheerful remarks about the newlyweds. But Clary's mind lingered on the wedge of distrust that still lay between her and Ethan. She couldn't forget the secrecy nor the sting of betrayal, yet she was now his wife by law. Once at the ranch, Mrs. Gable departed with a flurry of well wishes, promising not to spread too much gossip, though Clary suspected word would be all over Hope Springs before dinner time. Jed quietly excused himself to give them space, casting a final supportive glance before heading out to feed the horses. Alone on the porch, Clary rested her hand against one of the porch columns, staring across the rolling fields. She felt Ethan's presence behind her, his footsteps soft on the worn planks. The late afternoon sun bathed the land in a golden hue, mocking the turmoil in her heart. He cleared his throat. "I suppose we should talk." She turned, folding her arms protectively. "Yes, We should. His gaze flicked to her wedding band, then back to her face. I know this doesn't magically fix anything between us, but I meant every word today. I want to help you keep Willow Creek, and more than that, He hesitated, exhaling. I want you to have a life free from fear. A wave of conflicting emotion nearly overwhelmed her. You say these things, but how do I trust it's real and not some leftover corporate smooth talk? Pain flashed in his eyes. I can't force your trust, Clary. All I can do is prove myself through actions. If, after we secure the ranch, you still feel this is impossible, I'll step away. But part of me hopes you'll see that I'm not the same man who wore those suits and closed big deals in Seattle. Her chest tightened. She recalled how gentle he was with the horses, how he'd bonded with Jed and the ranch hands, the sense of relief she'd felt working side by side with him. Beneath all the hurt lay a fragile seed of something deeper. Love. She dared not name it yet. We have a lot to face, she said thickly, trying to steady her voice. Starting with Marcus. He'll be furious the moment he hears we officially married. Ethan nodded. Let him be. Legally, he's lost his main weapon unless he can prove fraud. If we act like a genuine couple, he has no path forward in court. Clary sighed. Acting is easier said than done, especially when we have so many unresolved issues. Without warning, the sound of a vehicle rumbling up the drive broke the tense moment. Clary leaned around the porch post to see a shiny black SUV approaching, the kind Marcus loved. Her heart lurched. Speak of the devil, she muttered. Marcus climbed out, slamming the door. His cold eyes flicked from Clary to Ethan, then zeroed in on the envelope peeking from Clary's shirt pocket. Well, well, he drawled, forcing a smirk. I hear congratulations are in order. The happy bride and groom. Let's see if that paperwork's as legitimate as you claim. Clary stiffened. It's none of your business anymore. We're married. End of story. Marcus gestured to the man stepping out from the passenger side, the same investigator from before. I'm here to serve notice that I'm filing a formal contestation. If I can prove this union is a sham, the ranch reverts to sale. Ethan's jaw set in anger. You're too late. We've followed every legal requirement. Marcus shrugged with a thin smile. Sometimes the law isn't black and white. My investigator has evidence of certain financial discrepancies and personal deceptions. If I show a judge that Mr. Walker's entire presence here was built on false pretenses, it might raise questions about the marriage's legitimacy. Clary's pulse thundered in her ears. She glanced at Ethan, recalling how he'd come to the ranch under a false identity. That might be enough ammunition for Marcus's lawyer to cast doubt. No court is going to side with you, she snapped, struggling to hide her fear. Marcus gave a low chuckle. We'll see. I've scheduled a preliminary hearing with a local judge next week. Better gather your defenses, cousin. He pivoted on his polished heel, leaving them in a swirl of dust. The SUV roared away, the investigator not even bothering to glance back. Clary clenched her fists, anger blazing. He's going to drag us into court, she said, her voice trembling, and if he reveals everything about your background... Ethan gently touched her shoulder, though she flinched at first. Let him, Ethan said, quiet but firm. I'll testify under oath how I came here, how we met. I'll show my finances are irrelevant to our marriage's validity. We did this to save the ranch, yes, but that doesn't make it fraud if we stand by our vows. She looked away, blinking tears. But it started as an arrangement. I had no clue who you were. Ethan's voice turned gentle, reflecting the pain that laced her own. I know. But despite that rocky start, I meant what I said. I care about you, and I care about this ranch. If you'll let me, I'll fight tooth and nail to keep Marcus from taking it, whatever it takes. Unsure how to respond, Clary stared into the distance, the sun dipping toward the horizon. She felt the swirl of 100 emotions: rage at Marcus, fear of exposure, lingering betrayal, and a flicker of gratitude for Ethan's unwavering commitment. She forced herself to breathe. "All right," she whispered at last. "We'll fight him. But don't expect me to be all smiles and affection in the meantime." Her tone wavered between bitterness and reluctant camaraderie. Ethan let out a slow breath, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Understood." They walked into the house together, an uneasy truce settling over them. Clary felt as though she stood at the brink of a cliff. One misstep, and Marcus would tear everything down. Another step, and she might plunge deeper into the confusing territory of genuine feelings for the man she'd married out of desperation. The tension was palpable, the stakes never higher. Next week's hearing would be the breaking point, or the moment of salvation. And the thread binding them to success was the uneasy, fragile bond between them, forged by necessity and tempered by a possibility neither dared name. The day of the hearing arrived in a swirl of anxious preparation. Clary, Ethan, and Jed drove into Hope Springs in near silence, each lost in thought about what Marcus had planned. Mr. Albright met them at his small law office, sporting a serious expression. He had spent days gathering documents, eyewitness statements, and any proof that Clary and Ethan's marriage was undertaken legitimately. Still, the entire defense hinged on whether a judge would see through Marcus's manipulations. At the courthouse, the hearing took place in a modest wood-paneled room. The judge, a stern-faced woman with silver-streaked hair, sat behind a raised bench. Marcus and his investigator sat at one table, while Clary, Ethan, and Mr. Albright took seats at the other. The atmosphere bristled with tension. Marcus's lawyer began, laying out a series of damning claims that Clary, in desperation to inherit Willow Creek, had essentially purchased Ethan as a spouse, that Ethan had concealed vital information about his background, making the marriage questionable, and that the entire situation reeked of fraud intended to circumvent the late grandfather's will. Clary's stomach churned with each insinuation. She felt Ethan's hand rest lightly on hers beneath the table, a silent offer of support. For the briefest second, she squeezed back. Their arrangement might have begun as purely practical, but it had become more complex than either of them could have foreseen. When it was Mr. Albright's turn, he calmly presented the legal marriage certificate, the timing consistent with the will's stipulation. He also produced letters and statements from Jed and Mrs. Gable, attesting to the genuine bond they had observed between Clary and Ethan. Pictures from the Hope Springs hoedown emerged. Photos of them dancing, smiling, looking very much like a couple. Clary's cheeks heated at the memory, but she realized how valuable those images were now. Finally, Ethan took the stand. Marcus's lawyer pounced immediately, questioning why he had hidden his identity. Ethan answered calmly, admitting he had left his corporate life behind, seeking anonymity to rediscover what mattered. The lawyer pressed, "Is it not true that you deceived Mrs. Evans from the beginning?" Ethan's gaze flicked to Clary, then back to the lawyer. "I withheld information about my financial status, yes, but I never lied about my capabilities as a ranch hand. I never sought to harm Clary or exploit her." Marcus's lawyer sneered. "How convenient. And yet you stand to gain from this marriage, correct? Perhaps merging your wealth with Willow Creek for some hidden commercial endeavor." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I've signed no prenuptial agreement that entitles me to any portion of Willow Creek. I came here to help, not to steal. My finances remain separate. My only goal is to support Clary in saving her ranch." On cross-examination, Mr. Albright asked Ethan about his daily contributions, the fences repaired, the livestock managed, the local involvement. Ethan provided clear, heartfelt answers, painting a picture of someone who truly embraced ranch life. In his final statement, he locked eyes with Clary. "Marrying Clary might have started as a practical solution, but my feelings for her and for Willow Creek are real. I don't regret it." Butterflies erupted in Clary's stomach. She struggled to keep her expression steady. She wasn't sure if it was relief, surprise, or some deeper emotion swirling in her. Then it was Clary's turn to take the stand. She dreaded the questions but steeled herself. Marcus's lawyer bore down. "Ms. Evans, did you or did you not seek a short-term partner online to fulfill the marriage clause?" Clary nodded. "I did. I had no choice. My grandfather's will forced my hand. But that doesn't negate what happened after Ethan arrived. We built a connection. Yes, it was unconventional, but it became real. My cousin Marcus wants to buy the ranch and tear it apart. I refuse to let that happen." Her voice trembled with anger and conviction. She described how Willow Creek was her home, how she'd protected it from financial ruin in the past, and how Ethan's help had revitalized the property. "I married him to save the ranch, yes, but I wouldn't have done that if I believed he meant me harm," she finished, cheeks burning. When the closing arguments ended, the judge called a brief recess. Clary, Ethan, and Jed stepped into the corridor, hearts hammering. Marcus passed by with a pointed glare. It felt like hours before they were called back. The judge's gaze was severe as she delivered her ruling. "While the circumstances of this marriage are highly unusual, the evidence does not indicate fraud intended to circumvent the will. On the contrary, it appears Ms. Evans and Mr. Walker have formed a legitimate partnership, albeit one sparked by extraordinary pressure. The court will not invalidate their union, nor will it grant Mr. Thorne's request to contest the inheritance." Clary's breath caught. Relief coursed through her, a rush that left her knees weak. Ethan exhaled audibly, and Jed squeezed her arm in silent congratulations. Marcus stood, face twisted in frustration, as the judge continued. "Accordingly, Willow Creek Ranch remains in Clara Evans's possession, and the marriage stands recognized under Montana law. This hearing is adjourned." A gavel tap echoed through the room. Just like that, the greatest threat dissolved. Clary felt tears prick her eyes as she turned to Ethan. They had done it, kept Willow Creek safe from Marcus's clutches. Her heart pounded with mingled triumph and confusion, because even though they'd won, a new question loomed. Where did that leave them now? Marcus stormed out, cursing under his breath, while Mr. Albright patted Clary's shoulder and left to file final paperwork. Alone with Ethan, she let out a shaky laugh, tears spilling over. Before she realized it, she was in his arms, clinging to the warmth of his embrace. For a moment, the tension between them lifted, replaced by relief and a tender sense of victory. "We did it," she whispered, pressing her face to his shoulder. The day after the hearing, the atmosphere at Willow Creek Ranch was one of cautious celebration. Jed roasted a few steaks on an old charcoal grill, and a couple of the ranch hands threw together a makeshift party, complete with country music on a portable speaker. Mrs. Gable arrived with a tray of cookies, determined to fuss over the newly married couple. Clary found herself caught in a swirl of relief and lingering uncertainty. On one hand, the ranch was secure. She truly owned it now, free from Marcus's schemes. On the other, her relationship with Ethan remained uncharted territory. They were officially husband and wife, but the betrayal still lay between them like a half-healed wound. Late that afternoon, she sneaked away from the impromptu gathering to catch her breath. Wandering past the barn and into a sun-dappled clearing, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Ethan, hands shoved into his jeans pockets, his expression carefully neutral. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." They walked side by side through the pasture, the grass swaying around their ankles. The sky was a stunning canvas of gold and lavender, the sun inching toward the horizon. Horses grazed nearby, as though sensing the tension yet offering no judgment. Finally, Clary broke the silence. "I haven't really thanked you for everything. Despite everything else, you stuck by me and helped save this place." He gave a small nod. "I'd do it again. I'm just sorry about the secrets that almost ruined it." Her chest clenched. "Yeah," she said softly, recalling the moment she discovered his identity. That sting of betrayal wasn't gone, but the raw fury had faded. After all, he had risked his own comfort and reputation to stand firm against Marcus in court. "So what happens now?" she asked, stopping to face him. "We're legally married, but our original deal was just until the inheritance was safe. That's done. So, do you still want to leave?" Ethan removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I promised I wouldn't run from my mistakes, and I meant it when I said I care about you, Clary. If you need space, I'll give you that. If you need me to move out, say the word. But if there's a chance you feel anything toward me, beyond anger, I'd like to see if we can make this marriage into something real." Her heart pounded at his open vulnerability. She glanced away, eyes drifting over the grazing horses. "I'm scared," she admitted, voice quivering, "scared of being hurt again, of letting someone in and regretting it. But I'm also tired of living with my defenses sky high." Ethan stepped closer, tentatively placing a hand on her arm. "I can't erase what I did, but I can try to prove I'm worth a second chance. Let me do that, slowly, on your terms." A gentle breeze stirred the strands of hair around her face. She looked up, meeting his gaze. Emotions warred inside her, yet a fragile sense of hope welled up. Every moment since the wedding, and especially since the court hearing, had shown her that Ethan was more than a wealthy CEO seeking a random escape. He'd integrated into ranch life, bonded with her community, and fought alongside her. Even Jed, usually a tough judge of character, respected him. "All right," she said at last, breath catching. "We can try, but this time, no secrets. I want honesty, Ethan. If you stay as yourself. Wealth, past, everything included." A relieved smile spread across his face, the first true smile she'd seen from him in days. "Deal," he murmured. Slowly, he reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Thank you." They stood there, hand in hand, letting the afternoon light cloak them in warmth. Clary felt the tension in her shoulders ease for the first time in ages. The question of how exactly they would transform their arrangement into a genuine marriage loomed, but at least they were both willing to try. Back by the barn, Mrs. Gable's laughter echoed across the yard, mingling with the ranch hands' voices. Clary smiled faintly. "We should probably head back before they think we've run off." Ethan lifted her hand to his lips in an unexpectedly tender gesture. "We'll go in a minute," he said, lowering their joined hands. "Just let me enjoy this peace with you." Her cheeks warmed. She nodded, allowing herself to savor the moment, the hush of the land, the steadfast presence of the man she now called husband. Though the marriage had been forged by necessity, an ember of real affection glowed at its center, waiting for the chance to grow into something more. When they finally walked back, the ranch staff greeted them with curious smiles and good-natured ribbing. Jed flipped steaks on the grill, arching an eyebrow at the sight of Clary and Ethan's linked hands. "Everything all right?" he asked with a knowing half-smile. Clary responded with a small nod. "We're getting there," she said, acknowledging both Jed's question and her own inner journey. That evening, the sky blazed with a magnificent sunset, crimson and gold streaks painting the horizon. Clary found herself standing alongside Ethan, arms lightly around each other, gazing at the twilight that promised a new day to come. Though the path ahead remained uncertain for the first time in a long while, hope outweighed her fears. Clary stepped into the early morning light with a steaming mug of coffee in hand. The hum of Willow Creek Ranch's awakening routine rose around her, the whinny of horses, the lowing of cattle, and Jed calling directions to the ranch hands. A gentle breeze ruffled the collar of her flannel shirt as she let her gaze drift to Ethan, who was busy unlatching the gate to the western pasture. They had been married, legally and openly, for nearly a month now. Since Marcus's defeat in court, the question of the ranch's future no longer loomed over every decision. Instead, the question had become how they, as a couple, would move forward. Rather than continuing to tiptoe around each other, they had chosen to try to build something genuine. A cautious peace hung in the air, a sense of new beginnings. Walking toward Ethan, Clary felt a mild twist of nerves, though far less intense than before. He turned at the sound of her boots on the gravel, offering a small smile. "Morning," he said, resting a hand on the fence post. A year ago, no one would have guessed this polished tech CEO might find solace in the dusty chores of a Montana ranch. But he wore the role as though he'd been born to it. She handed him the mug of coffee. "Thought you could use this." He took it with gratitude. "Thanks. We're moving the herd to the South Meadow later." "Figured I'd check the fences first," Clary nodded. "Good idea. I'll ride out with you if you'd like." A comfortable pause followed, and she realized how easy it was becoming to stand close to him without the constant tension of old resentments. The betrayal he'd once represented no longer consumed her thoughts. She still felt its echo, but his unwavering commitment had begun to soothe her misgivings. Their days were now marked by quiet cooperation, early breakfasts, shared chores, joint decisions about finances, and the subtle rhythms of living side by side. They had also started tentatively discussing the ranch's future plans. One evening, Ethan suggested modernizing a portion of the property for more sustainable irrigation systems. Clary, though initially cautious, admitted the ranch could benefit from advanced technology so long as the land's character remained intact. Each new conversation felt like a step toward merging their strengths rather than dwelling on past lies. Later that morning, they mounted their horses, Clary on her trusty buckskin mare, Ethan on a sturdy bay gelding, and headed out to inspect the distant fences. The sun rose higher, glinting off the tall grass and reflecting in the livestock's watchful eyes. As they rode, Clary caught herself admiring Ethan's natural ease. He'd once confessed how stifling his corporate world had been, yet here in the open expanse of Montana, he seemed to breathe freely. "You know," he said at one point, guiding his horse alongside hers, "I've been thinking about starting a small philanthropic venture out here, something for young people in Hope Springs who want to learn ranching but don't have land or resources." She raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Really? Like an apprenticeship program?" "Something along those lines," he agreed, his expression thoughtful. "We could invite kids from nearby schools, let them experience ranch life, teach them practical skills, maybe partner with the local agricultural extension. We have plenty of space, and it might spark the next generation's interest in keeping small ranches alive." A flicker of warmth rose in Clary's chest. She'd spent her entire life guarding Willow Creek, but sharing its bounty for a good cause felt right. "That sounds wonderful," she admitted. "I'd like to be part of that." Their eyes met, and the unspoken meaning passed between them. They were building more than fences. They were constructing a future that blended ranch tradition with modern insight, something bigger than themselves. By early afternoon, they finished the fence inspection and herded a small group of cattle to the south meadow. The work was sweaty and dusty, but it ended with a sense of accomplishment. Returning to the ranch house, they found Jed waiting in the yard, leaning against the barn door with a lopsided grin. "Y'all are busy these days," he teased. "All sorts of improvements in the works. Talk of new programs. You two are shaping up to be quite the power team." Clary flushed, but Ethan chuckled. "Hope we're not overstepping, Jed." He shook his head. "Not one bit. Feels good to see the ranch evolving while staying true to itself." They spent the rest of the day in the makeshift office, comparing costs for irrigation upgrades and scribbling notes about the proposed apprenticeship plan. Outside, ranch hands managed feeding and equipment maintenance, the hum of their labor a comforting background noise. When evening settled, Clary and Ethan left the paperwork to share a quiet dinner. She'd cooked a simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables, setting the table in the cozy dining room that once felt too large for just one person. Now, the space carried a new warmth. They ate by the mellow glow of a single lamp, discussing the day's tasks and trading small jokes about errands in Hope Springs. As they finished, Clary realized she wasn't on edge, wondering if she could trust him. The tension that once plagued every meal had receded, replaced by cautious companionship. It was still early, and there were no illusions that all their issues had vanished. But she sensed a real shift in the house's atmosphere, as though Willow Creek itself recognized they were both here for the long haul. That night, as she turned in, she glimpsed Ethan in the hallway, reviewing notes for the proposed apprenticeship program. Their eyes met, a gentle smile passed between them, and for a moment her heart felt light. They still had work ahead, personal, emotional, practical, but the first steps toward unity were solid, and for Clary, that was enough to carry her into tomorrow with hope. The Montana breeze blew through the open windows of the ranch house, carrying the scent of freshly cut hay and the distant sound of horse hooves. Clary sat on the living room floor, sifting through an old chest of family photos and documents. She'd unearthed it in a corner closet, untouched since her grandfather's passing. Faded pictures spilled across her lap, photos of the ranch from decades ago, black and white images of her grandparents in front of the barn, her father as a boy riding a pony. The memories stirred bittersweet longing in her. Her grandfather's legacy weighed on her shoulders, but after everything that happened, she finally felt able to revisit these mementos without crumbling under guilt or fear. Now that Willow Creek was secured from Marcus, she sensed that it was time to address the emotional scars she'd carried for so long. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and Ethan appeared, shirt sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed. "You organizing something?" She glanced up, heart giving an unexpected twinge at his casual warmth. "Trying to. These belonged to my grandparents. I was thinking of preserving them, maybe framing a few for the main hallway." Ethan knelt beside her, scanning the sepia images with genuine interest. "They look incredible, like living history. This place goes back generations." "Exactly," Clary said softly, brushing a speck of dust from a photo. "Sometimes I think about how they'd react to all that's happened. Would they approve of the lengths I went to in order to save the ranch? Would they, like you?" A faint smile tugged at his lips. "I hope so." Then he hesitated. "What about your father? He's not around much these days." She stilled, the old hurt rising. Her parents had left years ago to stabilize the family's dwindling finances after that disastrous business betrayal, never truly returning to reclaim day-to-day life on the ranch. "My dad's a good man, but he lost faith in the land after that fiasco," she explained quietly. "He felt safer investing in city real estate than dealing with the unpredictability of ranching." Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Might be worth talking to him about how you feel. Let him see how far you've come. Clary swallowed, a knot forming in her throat. Maybe we've been estranged, not because we fought, but because we just drifted apart. He thinks I'm stubborn for clinging to Willow Creek, and maybe he's right. Ethan's brow creased. You're not just clinging. You've turned this place into something thriving and hopeful. Anyone can see that. A wave of emotion pressed behind her eyes. Before she could speak, Jed tapped on the open door. Got a visitor, he said, nodding toward the front porch. Mrs. Gable's nephew is here. Says he wants to meet you two about some new community program. Ethan and Clary exchanged glances, the apprenticeship idea springing back to mind. They stood, Clary carefully setting the photos aside. We'll be right there, she told Jed. They found Mrs. Gable's nephew, Adam, on the porch steps. He introduced himself as a local teacher interested in bridging agricultural education for at-risk youth. Clary and Ethan invited him into the living room. For the next hour, they discussed ways to offer weekend workshops, everything from animal care to basic business management for small farms. Adam beamed at the prospect, noting how it could give teens a sense of purpose and connection to the land. Once he left, Clary realized how energized she felt. The ranch had always been her refuge, and now it could become a refuge for others too. Ethan seemed equally inspired, scribbling down ideas for lesson plans and volunteer schedules. Yet that night, alone in her bedroom, Clary found her mind circling back to the idea of unfinished business. She turned the wedding band on her finger thoughtfully. The ring felt less foreign now. It was a reminder not just of the deal they'd struck, but also the bond they were forging each day. Still, the past weighed heavily. Her father's departure, the old betrayal that shaped her mistrust, and the pain that nearly tore her and Ethan apart. At breakfast the following morning, she mustered the courage to speak. I'm thinking of inviting my dad to visit, she said, carefully setting down her coffee mug. We haven't had a real conversation in years. But I want him to see that Willow Creek is thriving, that it's safe again. Ethan leaned forward, concern and support mingling in his expression. Do you think he'll come? She exhaled. Hard to say. He's wrapped up in his investments out east. But I want to try. Maybe he'll understand why I fought so hard. Jed, seated across the table, nodded approvingly. About time you two talked. He might be surprised at all you've accomplished. Clary managed a faint smile. She glanced at Ethan, who offered a subtle nod. That was all the reassurance she needed. After clearing the dishes, she composed a brief message to her father, explaining she'd like him to see the ranch's improvements and meet Ethan. She hit send before her nerves could paralyze her. The next few days were busy with routine chores and further planning for the youth programs. Yet a low buzz of anticipation coursed through Clary as she waited for her father's response. Each evening, she checked her phone, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and hope. Finally, a reply arrived. Her father agreed to visit in 2 weeks, signing off with a polite but distant tone. He was proud to hear she'd safeguarded the ranch, and he wished to see how she was managing. Clary closed her eyes in relief, ignoring the churn of anxious energy building in her stomach. This wasn't just about proving her capability. It was about laying old ghosts to rest. That night, after everyone retired, she and Ethan lingered on the front porch, the stars burning bright in the dark Montana sky. She told him about the message, voicing her fears and excitement. He listened intently, resting a supportive hand on her shoulder. The gentle warmth of his presence soothed her racing thoughts. Together, they gazed at the vast heavens, shoulder to shoulder. Outside, the ranch they protected lay in tranquil slumber, a testament to resilience and legacy. Clary took a slow breath, acknowledging that to truly move forward with Ethan, she had to mend the fractures in her own past. Her father's visit would be the first step, finally settling the wounds that lingered like unspoken secrets in the ranch's halls. Clary had just turned off the ranch's gravel road onto the main highway when Ethan's phone buzzed insistently on the console. They were en route to a meeting with the county's Agricultural Extension Office to discuss youth programming. With a quizzical glance, Ethan picked up the phone. The number was unfamiliar. His jaw tightened after answering. "Walker speaking," he said cautiously. Clary heard muffled words from the other end of the line, though she couldn't decipher them. Ethan nodded a few times and mumbled non-committal replies before ending the call. He stared at the phone with a furrowed brow, clearly unsettled. "What happened?" Clary asked, pulling the truck onto the shoulder so they could talk without distraction. Ethan let out a breath. "One of my old business contacts. Word's gotten out that I'm active again, apparently. He wants me to come to Seattle for a consultation, something about a new tech venture." His eyes flicked to Clary, guilt or apprehension clouding them. "He mentioned a big salary, major perks, basically trying to lure me back." A spark of dread lit in Clary's stomach. "You said you left that life behind. Are you tempted to return?" He hesitated, rotating the phone in his hands. "Honestly, not really. But the timing is interesting. They pitched it as a short-term project, maybe 6 months, and the compensation is huge. If I took it, we could invest even more in Willow Creek, fund all those programs we've been dreaming up." His voice trailed off, uncertainty overshadowing the enthusiasm. Clary's throat tightened. "You always said you hated that corporate world. Why would you consider going back?" She tried to keep her tone even, but the fear of abandonment scratched at her. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched into his features. "I don't want to, not really. But the money could bring major improvements here, faster expansions, more land conservation. Still, it'd mean being away from you, from the ranch, for half a year. After everything we've been through, I don't want to uproot us." For a moment, she stared at him, torn between practicality and an emotional desire to keep him by her side. The memory of his secret identity rose unbidden, reminding her how easy it might be for him to slip back into that old world. "Do you want me to say it's okay, or do you want me to tell you not to go?" she asked softly, trying to mask her anxiety. Ethan sighed, placing the phone on the console. "I'm asking what you think, because this affects both of us. The ranch has potential, but there's so much we could do with a bigger budget. On the other hand, the life I left, it almost destroyed me, and it would mean leaving you to handle Willow Creek alone again." Her heart pounded. She glanced out the windshield at the open sky and endless farmland stretching in front of them. Willow Creek was safe from Marcus now, but what if Ethan, chasing a short-term corporate gig, reignited the wedge between them? "Let's talk this through," she said, pulling the truck fully off the road. They sat there, engine idling, the wind rustling the tall grass. "You hated that environment. Cutthroat deals, shallow relationships. Are you sure this wouldn't drag you back into that mindset?" He grimaced. "I'm not sure, but I do know I've changed since coming here. I'd approach the job differently, with boundaries. It might be just 6 months, then I'd return for good, and we'd have the resources to take Willow Creek to new heights." Clary's chest tightened at the prospect of him being gone for half a year. But she also recognized a spark in his eyes, a glimmer of ambition that she'd seen only hints of since discovering his secret. Ethan Walker was a man who thrived on purposeful action, whether mending fences or strategizing multi-million-dollar ventures. She respected that drive, even if it intimidated her. "Okay," she said slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "If you really think this is beneficial, I won't stand in your way." But I won't lie, part of me worries it might change everything between us. Ethan reached across the console, taking her hand gently. I don't want to lose what we have, but I also see a chance for something bigger, helping the ranch, the community. I promise to be transparent, no more secrets, no extended absences without communication. And if it starts to feel wrong, I'll walk away. Her heart ached with conflicting emotions, pride that he wanted to do something bold for Willow Creek, and fear of losing the fragile connection they'd built. Yet maybe this was their final test, trusting each other enough to pursue opportunities without shattering their bond. All right, she whispered, lacing her fingers with his. But we decide everything together. If you take this gig, we plan out how we'll stay in constant contact, how we'll keep the ranch running smoothly, and if you sense those corporate pressures pulling you back into that life you hated, you come home. He nodded, relief and gratitude washing over his features. Deal. I'll call them back tonight, tell them I'll at least hear the offer in detail, then we'll decide. Clary exhaled, pulling the truck back onto the highway. The tension in the cab felt heavy yet tinged with possibility. 6 months might not be forever, but it was long enough to rekindle old anxieties. Still, she refused to let fear govern her decisions. If Ethan truly belonged here at Willow Creek, he'd return willingly, with integrity, and they would reap the benefits of his efforts together. They continued to the county extension office, a swirl of questions haunting Clary's mind. Would this corporate detour tear them apart or cement their unity? Could her trust in him survive his re-entrance into the world he once fled? A fresh gust of wind swept across the open road, and she tightened her grip on the steering wheel, resolving that, whatever came next, they would face it together, one careful step at a time. Though Ethan's possible 6-month corporate stint hung in the background, life at Willow Creek pressed on with lively energy. Clary and Ethan decided not to rush any final decision about Seattle until they'd heard all details. In the meantime, they threw themselves into launching the new youth program. With Adam's help, they organized a ranch discovery day for local teens, an open invitation to learn the basics of horsemanship, fence repair, and even ranch economics. On a brisk Saturday morning, the first group of around 15 students arrived in a rickety school bus. They piled out, some wide-eyed, others pretending nonchalance. Clary greeted them with a welcoming grin. Her own nerves sparking at the sight of so many curious faces, Ethan stood by her side, offering nods and warm hellos. "Welcome to Willow Creek," Clary announced, projecting confidence. "We're going to show you what ranch life is really about. Not just boots and hats, though those are fun, but hard work, caring for animals, and building a sense of community." Jed led a session on proper horse grooming, patiently guiding the teenagers through brushing, hoof cleaning, and safety basics. While a few students seemed disinterested at first, Clary noticed them perk up when introduced to gentle, friendly horses eager for attention. Laughter rippled across the yard as kids realized how calm these massive animals could be under kind hands. Meanwhile, Ethan demonstrated fence-mending techniques, turning a potentially dull chore into a lesson in teamwork. He set them in small groups, teaching how to drive fence staples and check wire tension. The teens bickered a bit, but soon found their rhythm. One hammered posts, while another held wire in place. Each success elicited proud grins and nods. After lunch, Clary led a conversation on basic ranch economics. She kept it simple: feed costs, equipment maintenance, potential revenue from selling cattle or produce. "It's not all about big profits," she explained, flipping through a hand-drawn chart. "Sometimes ranching is about preserving a way of life, sustainability, heritage, and community. Yes, you can make money, but it's a long game of patience and planning." Watching the students' expressions shift from skepticism to curiosity gave her a deep sense of fulfillment. They asked questions about running a small farm, organic practices, and dealing with market fluctuations. Some admitted their families knew nothing about ranching, but wanted to learn more. Clary felt a spark of hope. Maybe at least one or two would carry this interest forward, helping preserve Montana's rural heritage. At the day's end, the teens gathered near the barn for parting words. Ethan offered a thoughtful reflection. "I grew up far from here," he said, choosing each word carefully, "and I used to think ranch life was just an old-fashioned pursuit. But since coming to Willow Creek, I've learned how vital this is, not just for the land, but for the people who depend on it. If you take nothing else away today, remember that real work and genuine connections matter more than any fancy office." Clary watched him with a twist in her chest. He never outright mentioned his corporate past, yet he hinted at the contrast he'd experienced. The students nodded, some snapping photos with their phones, others shyly thanking them. The bus pulled away in a plume of dust, leaving a lingering excitement in its wake. Mrs. Gable, who had swung by earlier to drop off cookies, squealed about how marvelous it was to see young folks discovering ranch life. "You two are making quite the difference," she praised, giving them both an approving grin. That evening, Clary found Ethan out by the corral. He leaned against a fence rail, gazing at a few horses lazily flicking their tails in the fading sunlight. She sidled up beside him, resting her arms on the top rail. "They seemed to enjoy it, didn't they?" she said softly, referencing the students. He nodded. "Definitely. I hope it plants a seed." They fell into companionable silence, the ranch glowing under the golden hour sky. Then, clearing his throat, Ethan said, "I spoke with that contact in Seattle this afternoon. They sent over a formal proposal." Clary's heart pinched. "And—" he exhaled. "It's a big project, a major revamp of a tech platform. They want me to lead the team, salaries huge, plus a stake in profits if it succeeds. But it means living in Seattle for 6 months, maybe more." She stared at the horizon, the weight of his words pressing down. "I see," he turned toward her. "I still don't want to lose what we're building here, or what we're building together. I'd come back once the job is done, invest in the ranch. But I won't do it if you can't handle me being gone that long." Clary's throat felt dry. She shifted, meeting his gaze. "I can't say I love the idea," she admitted, voice trembling slightly. "But if you believe this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, maybe it's worth it. We worked hard to secure Willow Creek, and this could accelerate everything we're trying to do. For the kids, for the land." Her heart hammered. Part of her wanted to cling to him, afraid that if he left, their fragile bond would unravel. Yet she recognized that controlling him would only breed resentment, and she refused to repeat old mistakes of mistrust. He swallowed. "It's your choice too, Clary. I won't go if it tears us apart." A wave of tenderness, mixed with fear, washed over her. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then let's talk it through carefully. Plan it. I won't pretend it's easy, but you've proven you're not just a corporate shark, and I'm not the terrified woman I was months ago. If we handle it together, maybe we can come out stronger." Ethan's expression softened, gratitude and relief mingling in his eyes. He slipped an arm around her waist. "Together, then," he murmured. They stood like that, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in pink and orange streaks. It felt symbolic, the day ending, but a new one waiting to dawn, full of uncertain promise. Whether Ethan left for 6 months or stayed, their community outreach, their marriage, and Willow Creek's future would keep moving forward, carried by their resolve and shared vision. In the distance, a horse neighed, as if urging them onward. Clary leaned her head against Ethan's shoulder, letting the hush of the twilight settle around them. Renewing the community and forging a deeper unity with Ethan were 2 roads she'd never imagined traveling, but standing at this crossroads, she felt ready. Whatever the future held, she wouldn't face it alone. 2 weeks later, the ranch bustled with nervous anticipation. Clary's father, James Evans, was due to arrive that afternoon. She hadn't seen him in nearly 3 years, and before that, their visits were sporadic at best. Her stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and dread. Would he criticize her choices? Would he belittle the ranch's progress or her marriage to Ethan? Ethan, sensing her jitters, kept close by all morning. They organized a quick inspection of the paddocks, made sure the barn was spotless, and triple-checked the new irrigation system's progress. Despite the tension, Clary caught herself smiling when she saw Ethan calm a skittish mare with gentle expertise. Watching him handle ranch tasks so naturally reminded her how far they'd come together. Early afternoon brought a sleek rental car rolling up the drive. Clary smoothed her shirt and stood on the porch, heart hammering. A tall man with neatly combed salt and pepper hair emerged, glancing around with narrowed eyes. He looks older, she thought, struck by the lines around his mouth and the faint stoop in his shoulders. "Dad," she managed, stepping forward. "Thanks for coming." James surveyed her, then extended a hand, which she took briefly before pulling him into a somewhat stiff hug. He patted her back awkwardly. "Clary, good to see you." Ethan cleared his throat beside her. "Mr. Evans, I'm Ethan, Clary's husband," he said, offering a handshake. Her father's brow lifted. "Yes, I've heard. Congratulations, I suppose." He scanned Ethan appraisingly before turning back to Clary. "You look well, honey. The ranch appears thriving." Clary exhaled the tension locked in her chest. "It is. Come inside. We'll talk over coffee." Inside, Jed doffed his hat politely, greeting James with a nod before slipping away to give them privacy. Clary guided her father to the living room, where she and Ethan had set out a fresh pot of coffee and homemade biscuits. She noticed her father's gaze lingering on the framed photos on the mantel. Her grandparents, herself as a teen. He said nothing, though a flicker of nostalgia crossed his face. They made small talk at first: the weather, James's real estate ventures back east, the general state of the economy. Clary answered politely, but felt a ball of anxiety in her gut. Finally, she forced herself to address the elephant in the room. "So, I suppose you know the ranch was in jeopardy after Grandpa's will and the whole marriage clause?" James nodded, sipping his coffee. "I heard rumors. Marcus tried to sway me, but I wouldn't entertain him. Didn't think he could legally force a sale if you followed the terms." Clary bit her lip. "I did follow them. Ethan and I married before my birthday. We took Marcus to court, and we won. He can't touch the land now." Her father's gaze swung to Ethan. "Marcus told me all sorts of wild stories, some business about Ethan being a secret millionaire and the marriage being a fraud. But I also heard that the local judge upheld your claim." His tone was measured, as though testing Ethan's sincerity. Ethan inhaled slowly. "Your cousin wasn't wrong about my background. I did come here from a corporate world, but it wasn't a fraud. We've built a genuine life here. I'm committed to Willow Creek and to Clary." For a moment, James studied Ethan, then turned to Clary. "Are you happy?" he asked bluntly. She blinked, feeling her throat tighten. She glanced at Ethan, recalling the heartbreak, the fury, the relief, and finally the cautious love that now wove through their marriage. "I am," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "We've been through a lot, but the ranch is safe, and I'm content with the direction we're heading." Her father set the coffee cup down, shoulders relaxing a fraction. "That's all I ever wanted for you, security and peace of mind. After that fiasco years ago, He paused, clearing his throat. "I didn't want you to get hurt." Emotions welled up. And Clary felt tears prick her eyes. "I know, but leaving me here alone to handle the ranch didn't protect me, Dad. It just made me more determined to push everyone away. I wish we had stayed closer." A flicker of regret passed across James's face. "I see that now. I'm sorry." His voice wavered, genuine remorse seeping through his controlled facade. "I was too wrapped up in my own fear. But it looks like you managed just fine, and then some." They shared a long, poignant silence. At last, James asked, "Would you give me a tour? Show me the improvements?" Relief warmed Clary's chest. "Of course!" She and Ethan guided her father around the ranch, pointing out the new irrigation lines, the improved fencing, and the budding apprenticeship program. James asked thoughtful questions, occasionally nodding in approval. Clary felt a mix of pride and catharsis, finally able to display how far she'd come. Meanwhile, Ethan added insights, politely deferring to Clary's leadership when it came to the ranch's long-term vision. By sunset, they ended up at the top of a gentle slope overlooking fields bathed in amber light. James stood quietly, soaking in the vista. "Your grandfather would be proud," he murmured. Then, turning to Clary, he managed a small, sincere smile. "And so am I." Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she blinked them away, returning his smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "It means a lot." They walked back to the ranch house, the sky ablaze with pink and gold. That night, James stayed for dinner, simple but hearty stew with cornbread, made from Clary's grandmother's recipe. The conversation flowed more freely than it had in years, sprinkling in old family anecdotes and even a few gentle jokes about the ranch's transformation. When James retired to the guest room, Clary stood in the hallway, feeling a sense of closure bloom inside her. Later, she and Ethan stepped onto the porch, where the stars glistened against the endless Montana night. Crickets chirped in the tall grass, and the soft whinny of a horse drifted on the breeze. Hand in hand, they gazed at the ranch that had tested them both, forging a bond from desperation into something genuine. "You did it," Ethan said, voice hushed. "You brought your father home." Clary leaned against him. "We did it," she corrected, letting her eyes wander across the moonlit fields. This land was more than just a piece of real estate. It was heritage, love, and a living testament to resilience. A quiet sense of peace settled in her chest. The simple girl, who had once needed a husband of convenience, now stood as a woman who had chosen her own path, fiercely protecting her legacy, forging real connections, and learning to trust a man who'd arrived under false pretenses, yet stayed out of genuine devotion. Together, they had not only inherited Willow Creek but also built a new legacy, a promise of hope for the next generation, for the community around them, and for each other. In the vast silence of the Montana night, Clary Evans Walker felt contentment unlike anything she had known before. The ranch, the marriage, the future, they were all hers to shape, and for the first time, she welcomed that responsibility with open arms. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.